At this time, I would like to call to order the April 6, 2023 North County Transit District Strategic Workshop Special Meeting. It's a lot to say. Members of the public who may be viewing this meeting on the district's YouTube page, please note that in order to make a public comment during the meeting, you must connect to the meeting using the Zoom link provided on the agenda. In addition, you must also register by sending an email containing your name or phone number and the agenda item on which you wish to speak to clerk@nctd.org. Suhel Rodriguez, our illustrious clerk of the board, please call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Board Alternate Joyce.
Present.
Board Member Hinsey.
Present.
Board Member Contreras.
Present.
Board Alternate Garcia. Board Member Desmond.
Here.
Board Member Drucker.
Here.
Board Chair Edson.
Present.
Board Member Jenkins.
Here.
Vice Chair Bapatel. Here. That completes the roll.
Thank you very much. Board Member Hinsey, would you please lead us in the pledge? Thank you. Thank you very much. Suhel, will you please provide a safety brief and review evacuation procedures?
Yes. In case of an emergency, I will dial 911. In case of an evacuation, please take the stairs. Do not use the elevators. Once cleared of the building, do not re-enter unless cleared to do so by emergency personnel. There are fire extinguishers and first aid kits on each floor of the building. There is a portable defibrillator on the first floor and staff on hand trained on CPR procedures if needed. This concludes my safety brief.
Thank you very much. Do we have any public comments today?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have one virtual attendee that would like to speak, Ms. Barbara Collins.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. Please go ahead.
Ms. Collins, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm Barbara Collins, and I am here on behalf of the Sierra Club, and I'm making comments on the proposed redevelopment of the Oceanside Transit Center and its potential environmental impacts. The redevelopment project demonstrates many aspects of smart growth, and the Sierra Club supports that. It's in the core of the city. It's right on the transit hub or at the transit hub. And so there's a lot to like about the project, and we do. There's also some concerns that we have after reviewing the plans at this point and talking to some of the representatives of your development project, Toll Brothers and NCTD folks. What we're concerned about is here we have the premier transit hub of North County, and we are worried that we're not taking full advantage of this opportunity to limit single occupancy vehicle trips that will be generated by a large project like this. And what we would urge the board to do is to make sure that transportation demand management is given the importance and the priority that it merits with this project. We think that there should be a comprehensive and robust transportation demand management plan for the entire project. We would like to see all of the planned uses, the hotel, the multifamily housing, office space, retail, and the amenities, each have a good transportation demand management plan. We know that that can significantly reduce the car trips that will be required for all of these uses. And an important part of that, of a transportation demand management plan, would be parking demand management. We see that the proposal is touting the addition of about 1,800 new parking spaces and in addition to the existing parking structure. And we understand the need to accommodate the new housing units and all of these uses. But we also know that a parking demand management strategy would reduce the VMTs and the environmental harm that a project like this can generate. One important point I'd like to make, a couple things. There's going to be a relaunch of a on-demand shuttle service in downtown Oceanside this summer. We think that the NCTD should consider incorporating a shuttle service like this as part of the redevelopment plan. And it could be a very important solution to the first and last mile challenge of getting commuters to your transit hub, but then to their final destination. And we think
Ms.
that
Collins, thank you very much, but your time is up. Appreciate you being here and sharing with the board today.
Thank you. I submitted some written comments also.
Thank you very much. Suhel, it comes to my attention that I forgot to ask you if we have any changes to today's agenda.
We do not, Madam Chair.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Before we proceed, I have a couple of quick protocol items to share. First, I ask that board members please hold your comments and questions until after each agenda item has been presented. And second, when the time comes for board member questions and comments, please raise your hand and wait until you're called upon to speak. Makes things pretty organized. Yeah. So the first workshop item on today's agenda is an update on the district's strategic plan. NCTD staff and a team of consultants have conducted a comprehensive review of our current strategic plan. In response, they've developed a presentation to outline the proposed changes to the strategic plan for the board's consideration. At today's meeting, we are seeking feedback from the board regarding changes to the plan's outline. This input will then be incorporated into the detailed strategic plan that will be included in the FY 2024 operating budget and capital improvement program. Laura Cote, our interim director of training and organizational development, and Lori Gaffigan. I've been practicing that one. Consultant with Performance Works will ultimately be presenting this item. However, before they begin, two things. One is that we have some board members with pretty hard stops. So if we can keep things concise and on track, that'd be great for today. But also our executive director, Matt Tucker, has a few words to share. Matt?
Thank you. So as we kick this off, I just wanted to walk the board a little bit through the journey of the district. So in 2008, I was hired with the mandate to address a structural deficit. And the early years of my employment was focused in on contracting out, cost cutting, and creating an organizational structure around contract management so that we were pivoting into a contract management agency. Over the course of the next 3 to 5 fiscal years after my hire in 2008, based upon the leadership of the board, we were able to achieve financial stability. And I think the context of understanding that these were more than 20% annual deficits was pretty significant. Understanding part of the deficit was starting of the Sprinter service with no dedicated source of funding. So that was what dominated the initial 5 to 6 years of my employment at the district. Kind of overlapping some of that time over the last 8 to 10 years, we've made significant progress in terms of establishing the organization, creating a culture of compliance, and establishing policies and procedures to include the establishment of the board policies that exist today. To give you context, that when I was hired in 2008, NCTD had never in its history from the 1970s had an employee handbook. And there was no such thing as a board policy or internal board procedures. And the fact that we were also, we did not have an in-house general counsel. And one of the things for me coming into the context of this agency was capturing the nuance of this agency, which is something that I think everybody at NCTD has really kind of seen in the light of, in terms of the audits that we've had from the Federal Transit Administration, that they've come in and done the triennial review, which means happens every 3 years, and a financial management oversight. And it's funny because when they came in, they thought maybe we were doing something quirky. What they realized was that we were super duper unique. Super duper unique in the sense that when you think about NCTD, you have to put it in a context, which is hard, of the biggest transit agencies in the country in terms of the modes that we operate. But then when you look at the budget, our budget is significantly less. But what that means, you get the same level of responsibility and challenges as those agencies have, particularly in the sphere of operating railroads, maintaining tracks, supporting interstate commerce movement, all of those fun things that go along with it. So it was great that as we went through those audits, we got pretty much a clean bill of health as much as you could ever get in that type of process. But we also kind of got a real recognition from them. Okay, you guys are different. We need to make sure we're paying attention when we're doing things. The board policies that were established were really, really important. Because before, in the absence of board policies, it means your executive director doesn't have an organizational framework of what's in the box. And it was critical for me that, in fact, it was so critical, I wrote the initial board policies because I felt like I didn't want to be in a position of having so much policy out there that I could execute on my own without board authority. It kind of put in a safe space for me to operate. And it's within that framework, we shortly thereafter brought in in-house general counsel. Again, reflecting that the executive director should not be reviewing and approving contracts because that's not my skill set. So we, during that same 8 to 10 years, we've made like a ton of progress in terms of our capital backlog. And if you start looking at the amount of projects, bridge projects and other activities and bus replacement projects, we had a pretty big backlog of project needs. Now, some of this is just attributable to the fact that, there's more funding coming in from the state. Now there's new infrastructure money coming in, but we really had to work hard over the course of these 15 years to really squeeze down our expenses and focus those dollars. And we've now kind of reached a really good, happy space. We do have control over our capital program. And if the region makes wise decisions about dollars that we have, we should, over the next 5 to 10 years, be able to achieve a significant portion of the goals related to capital program needs, as well as operational needs. So this kind of brings us into the context of where we are today, where we have had to do a lot of things to get to a point of stability, to get to a point of organizational framework. There's an underlying rhyme and reason of why we do stuff, that we're at this inflection point that we now need to be focusing on delivering for our customers and employees. And you can't disconnect those two in terms of customers and employees. And that's what the context is of updating our strategic plan is going to be all about. And so I want you to think about kind of these broad themes that you're going to hear repeatedly from us. Operational excellence. There's going to be a test at the end, multiple choice. Operational excellence, organizational excellence, customer service excellence, and community connection. You're going to hear it throughout the presentation today. The strategic plan reflects what I have called the grand or great convergence of 3 consultant studies that we were doing, for which ended up coming together perfectly to support updating it. We had contracted with Performance Works to help us in support of our strategic plan. We had separately contracted with board approval with Deloitte to do that market research and ridership analysis, kind of looking at the transportation from a broader landscape post-COVID-19. To help us develop a framework for what are those no regret decisions that we should be making. So you're going to get that second part of that presentation. And the third consultant is DB, Deutsche Bahn, who's working closely with NCTD And it's a project that I'm quarterbacking associated with performance management and quality management, with the focus of not operational, but the entire NCTD. It reflects kind of the understanding everything that we do, whether it be in finance or human resources, or actual bus service, rail service, or risk management. They're all connected activities that impact our ability to be successful from a broader point of view. So this grand convergence and this update of the strategic plan reflects all of these things being channelized and brought together in one stream of an update. So I'm super duper excited about it, even though I'm typically not excited about updated strategic plan and mission vision and all that fun stuff, because it reflects the true reality of the things that are critical for the district going forward in their future. That's why I'm excited about it. It resonates as something that's actually real. And it's also going to be something as we come forward with the upcoming budget, those priorities, assuming you all support this, are going to be reflected in the budget. That if we're going to be serious about quality management and performance management, we're going to have to resource that. And we're going to be serious about moving away from manual processes and implementing the technologies that we need. We need to resource that, right? And so this is all about the true up of a strategic plan that should reflect the next 5 years of our operations and our push towards customer excellence, as well as excellence for our employees. So with that, I'm happy to turn this over to Laura. I have to like pause, Laura and Lori. I can't say it fast, so it's all yours.
Got it. Thank you, Matt. And it's a real pleasure for Lori and I to be here with all of you today to talk about the last year or so of information that we've gathered. And you're going to hear from Lori directly about that data gathering and the process that we went through to get here, as well as some of the bigger results that are here for your feedback. So I wanted to just frame a little bit about what we're here to do today. Clearly to present to you an outline of our strategic plan so that we can then finalize some of the formal work that's already begun internally to build around those major key themes. So our key results, key performance indicators, and all of the work plans and action items and all of the stuff that goes into helping each of our employees be successful, of course, and then providing service to our region. And so for today, it's about vision and guidance from you so that we can take everything that you say today to complete the refinement of the strategic plan itself. And again, as Matt mentioned, you're going to be seeing that detail back to you through the budget process that will come back over the next few months. So today is about the broader vision and the outline, and then the finer detail will come back to you again for final approval in about 2 to 3 months. So at this time, I'd like to turn things over to Lori Goffigan, who will be presenting the remainder of the presentation. So Lori.
Hi, everybody. Hello. Thanks.
Hi, Lori, welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to see many of you again and see some new faces. We were last here in October when we shared with the executive committee some of the early findings, got some fantastic feedback from all of you, if you recall, and hoping that you will see reflected in the work done so far, the issues and priorities that you shared with us at the time. So, from the get-go, the directive really from Matt around this work was to use it as an opportunity to educate ourselves about the pains and priorities of employees, external stakeholders, board, business partners. And the goal in the simplest terms has been to create a shared vision for the future. We talk about strategic planning as asking and answering 3 questions. Who are we? Where are we going? And how will we get there? The beauty of this convergence, as Matt's calling it, of the braiding, is it is allowing us to build a plan for the future that is reflective of multiple components of the organization, right? There is issues around vision and mission and values that we're going to talk about today. There is how that translates into policies and practice and what that then means for operations. And so, you know, the brilliance of bringing these together is that through Deloitte's work, DB's work, and Performance Works, we will have a comprehensive document that will walk through all of those levels of the organization as a roadmap for the future. So the plan, you know, as designed, has been informed by significant internal and external stakeholder feedback. It's designed to improve the capacity, or else, you know, why would we do it? And to provide both internal and external stakeholders with this district-wide understanding about changes and plans for the future. Next, we go. So what have we done? Laura referenced, you know, we've been at this about a year, right? And we started out with having multiple meetings internally with chiefs and directors to really understand what are the pain points, right? You know, what's working, what's not working, what are the opportunities for change? We did a tremendous amount of internal interview work, focus group, one-on-one interviews, employee focus groups. We convened task forces throughout the agency over multiple months to look at specific issues that arose. We met with the mayors in North County. We talked with 8 of you and your colleagues at the time. We even did some best practice interviews talking with executive directors of other transit agencies across the country. So all of that was designed as qualitative, right? As I was saying, sort of what are the opportunities, what's working, what's not working so well. We talk about qualitative research as the search for truth, and then we test it with quantitative. So then we followed all of that qualitative research up internally with a survey that was actually completed by over 85% of the employees within the agency, which it breaks, you know, frankly, all kinds of records. Like we were told to expect, oh, if you get 40%, maybe you get 50%, that's really great participation. But we had over 120 people within the agency respond to the survey. And so we had this balance, right, of both qualitative and quantitative data. Next, we go. As a level set, wanted to share with you the framework that we're using to build out the strategic plan. And you will see this embedded in the work that we're going to share, because this ends up being sort of the dashboard or the roadmap of how it is that we summarize and consolidate the plan. And it's really built around this idea of why, what, and how, right? Why are we here? What are we doing? And how do we deliver? And that within those components, we've begun to unpack the why with taking another look, a refreshed look at the existing vision and mission, really taking a step back to think about what are the guiding principles of our culture, right? Who are we? What do we stand for? What do we believe in? And then how do those manifest as values? And truthfully, that's all new stuff for NCTD, in the same way that Matt talked about when he arrived, you know, what existed and what didn't exist. At a cultural level, right, at an organizational level, some of that fundamental infrastructure around how we work, how we treat each other, how we engage, what we believe in also didn't exist. So this was a really great opportunity to fill that void and respond to a clearly stated need, a very clearly stated need by employees to have that be part of the organization. As Matt talked about the emergent pillars, right? What are the foundational pillars that the objectives and the key results, meaning the work that we're going to do, what do they hang on? So we're going to talk a little bit about those 4 strategic pillars: operational excellence, organizational excellence, customer service excellence, and community connection. And Jewel, you actually gave us the term community connection at that October workshop, and it's in our notes right here. And so you'll see that, you know, I think one of the biggest emergent new areas of focus in all of this work is this deep attention to building relationship in the community. So to start with what we've done, right? And this is called a workshop. So this is really meant to be a conversation, not a monologue. You know, this has to work for you guys as well as it works for us. And so what we want to test with you, almost pressure test with you today, is this some language around a refreshed vision statement and mission statement. And again, in response to kind of an internal hunger to have a bigger impact, an internal hunger as stated by all of you guys, by business partners, as well as employees, about how can we own who we are and what we do in a way that is explicitly designed to have a greater impact, right? How do we carve out more space for what we're doing in our community? And so the vision statement that, you know, I would say is a working draft, you know, pending feedback, of course, is North County Transit District envisions a comprehensive transit and mobility system that connects all North County San Diego residents and visitors to a healthy, economically and thriving region. You know, to try to get at what is this vision to be part of an economically vibrant and thriving region, and to be a player in that through designing a mobility system to deliver. So, you know, oh, can we stay? That's okay. And then the vision, of course, is, so you know, a vision statement is like, why are we here? What's our purpose? A mission statement then is, so what are we going to do about it? And the proposed new mission statement is North County Transit District's mission is to operate an environmentally sustainable and fiscally responsible transit network that provides seamless mobility for all while achieving organizational and operational excellence. So again, we are setting the bar higher for ourselves around this idea of why do we exist as part of this vibrant, thriving region? And what are we going to do to get there? Focus on environmental sustainability, fiscal responsibility, seamless delivery. Any, do you want me to keep going? Any thoughts or comments, reactions, thumbs up, keep going? Okay, we'll keep going. So that led us then, you know, with that vision and mission in mind, led us to this idea of the foundational pillars of delivery, right? What are the areas, the priority areas of focus that will sustain the work over the next 5 years? Operational excellence, organizational excellence, customer service excellence, and community connection. And what you will see as these develop, and as Laura said, you know, in the budget document, is you will begin to see a series of objectives and key results that fall under each of these pillars that reflect the work that Deloitte is doing on ridership, that DB is doing, and that Performance Works is doing. So this is where all three tracks of work get braided together. Next, please. Anything you want to add, Matt? You good? Okay. So some definitions, right? Because one of the things that we realized very early on is that we could say something like operational excellence, but chances are every single one of us would attach a different meaning to it, right? And so what was important was to get down to the ground level to say, we may say that these are our 4 strategic pillars, but what do they actually mean? And what are we going to do to deliver on this? So operational excellence, a statement of committing to growing the capacity of North County's transit system on a foundation of quality, efficiency, best practice, and safety. You can't believe, you know, the wordsmithing that goes on to say, how are we capturing these concepts, you know, accurately? And as importantly, not just the definition of what we mean by operational excellence, but what are we going to do, right? So in each of these cases, the structure is a definition, and then what are we doing? We do this by focusing on, in this case, focusing on quality and security of the transit experience. So we're not, we're using again, broader framing, the entire experience, as well as reliability, availability, and frequency of service. So when we talk about operational excellence, quality and security, reliability, availability, and frequency. Organization, I'm not done yet. Organizational excellence is a mix of sort of internal and external, but prioritizing agency performance that's driven by efficiency and effectiveness, inclusivity, with systems, resources, work practices, and policies that optimize fiscal responsibility and employee productivity, right? We're trying to hit this balance of how do we ensure productivity? How do we ensure fiscal responsibility? How do we look at the totality of the organization? And using sort of a systems thinking perspective, right? Through practices, through policies, through systems and tools. So we do this by focusing on the efficiency and effectiveness of systems, policies, and processes, creating a culture of engagement and high performance, reliable delivery of district-wide projects and reporting, and cost management and maximization of diverse revenue streams. So again, carving out some new territory here, right? How do we diversify revenue streams? How do we state very clearly that we're prioritizing a culture of engagement and productivity? Okay. For customer service, this becomes the banner, right, that we hang our work on. Delivering customer service and employing specific ways for NCTD to increase ridership in both new and existing riders is the focus of the ridership growth strategy, right? We all, in all of the interviews that I did with each of you in the group conversations, it has been coming out of COVID. What do we do? How do we rebuild? How do we expand? How do we engage? That whole idea of moving to an experience of choice. And, what does that look like? So we do this by focusing on an accessible and seamless customer experience, focusing on new and underserved markets, focusing on customer safety and comfort, and customer access to information and resources. Like each one of these is a strategy, right? Each one of these will have a series of actions and objectives that fall under it with an action plan over multiple years to accomplish. And then the last one, which feels, as fresh and new and potentially very exciting for the benefits that this can yield, is this focus on community and becoming an integral partner in the community, providing ways for community to be more aware of who NCTD is and what they do. So as an integral part of North County community and the Southern California region, we're stewards of the environment, using resources to benefit the entire community, serving the needs of all stakeholders, and being ambassadors for our region. So really trying to carve out some territory again and being very explicit about our values around community engagement. So community engagement that prioritizes equity, awareness, and access, focusing on regional relationships and collaboration, environmental stewardship, as well as economic growth. So community development, economic development. So those are how we're thinking about these pillars and the objectives and the key results that are already in development that will sort of undergird those that, map out the strategy. And focusing now, sort of more internally, was this idea that we felt that there was a piece missing around our culture, which is, what do we believe in? Like, how is it, what is the foundation of how we treat each other and how we work? And so we created in plain speak that will be part of ongoing communications, recruiting, internal, external, is these 4 ideas. We show up for each other, right? This speaks to trust. This speaks to collaboration. This speaks to being aligned around a common goal and a common vision. We work collaboratively to achieve our vision and mission. This is about breaking down silos, working across the line, really institutionalizing the idea that we're all in this together and we're a team, and that we don't default to, well, that's my department or that's my department, but how do we again make very explicit that this is a priority? We say what we mean and we mean what we say. Organizations, it's hard to say what we mean oftentimes, right? And to be able to put that out front and say, we value honesty, we value debate, we think there is power in debate and how do we model disagreement in healthy ways, and how can we work together with integrity that says we will do what we say. And the last one is about excellence, right? Excellence and performance, which is get it done and do it well. We have heard lots and lots through all of the conversations with employees about how committed employees are to doing the job to their best of their ability. And it seemed important to codify that, right? To say, we recognize that we're all working super hard. And we also recognize and value the focus on quality that we all bring to our work. So from those principles, we built a set of values. So Suhail, we can go to the next one. And as I said at the outset, there weren't values that existed in this organization as part of the culture. And so they were implied and they were suggested and they were sort of understood, but they weren't explicit and they weren't stated and they weren't clear. And we felt like it was really time to do that, to say, this is what's important here and this is why it's important. And as importantly, this is the behavior that accrues when we talk about that value, right? Because one of the things in organizational terms is sometimes organizations will have values, but everybody interprets them differently and nobody really knows what they mean. So by focusing on this, what is it and how, like, what does it look like? What is the behavior that's associated with the value? We now have a tool that we can translate into performance reviews, into career development, into recruiting, because it's super clear what we expect and what we value and how we treat each other. So there's a lot of words on this page and I want to be respectful of time. And so I'm not going to read sort of all of the detail. You guys have it in front of you, but I will say that, at a high level, we talked a lot about integrity, right? We talked a lot about being truthful and accountable. This idea of service, right? It's about being in service to others. That's why we're here. Stewardship, of taking care of the region and the communities we serve. Innovation, a lot of you guys talked about being more innovative in how we think about service delivery, and this idea of asking what if, or asking, I wonder if we did this, like, how do we instantiate this idea of creative problem solving into the work that we do? Collaboration, we've talked about, relying on partnerships, relying on relationships to deliver better results. Suhail, next one. Openness, back to that idea of debate, and with debate comes commitment, with commitment comes accountability. Continuous learning, how do we invest? How do we invest in our staff so that we're always getting better at what we do? Recognition, recognizing the contributions and values of employees in ways that they feel and that they see. Respect, engaging with each other in ways that are respectful, demonstrating that we care about each other, we care about one another and our needs. This is really part and parcel of all of the conversations about diversity, equity, inclusivity, and belonging. The idea of job mastery, right? Going back to technical excellence. Next one, please. So those are the values as stated. There are 10. And this framework is how it starts to get fleshed out. And this is really the end of the presentation, as it were, today, which is to say, this is the roadmap we're building, right? We talked about a vision, a mission, principles, and values. We've talked about strategic pillars, and the next sort of reveal, as it were, for all of you will be these very specific objectives with key results, and the key results being the performance metrics. And that the work of DB and Deloitte and Performance Works will all be reflected, and then starting in the fall, we put it to action, right? And so that coming out of the how will be a series of action plans that speaks to how we implement. On that note,
I will wrap us up.
Well, before we
Oh,
wrap it up, because I don't want to
okay.
make it appear that this is going to be easy, which I don't think you did. But on this particular one, so I have, and I read it this weekend and started editing the quality management plan for the district. It's like this thing. And it takes all of these things and it pulls them down to KPIs, and it relates some of these relationships to come up with weighted factors. And after I read it, I emailed Deloitte and said, we can't do this overnight. And it likely will take us at least 2 years of this as a draft document to grow into the document. Some of what you're hearing today reflects, so we got down, when I got here, I think we were close to 600 employees, but we got down as low to 80 employees. And then as we were really trying to cut costs, we were, very insular in terms of the operations. And so you could have a group of people and you're just doing your own thing. And now, as we start unbundling and trying to get to places that we need to get to support future goals, everything now has to be connected, including people's performance, that you may be doing great individually within your department, but you also may be stifling the ability for us to achieve other goals by the fact you've made it easy for you, but not necessarily conducive to our operation, or we don't have a system in place, or we are using manual processes, which we do. We have a lot of manual processes. And so I don't want the board to walk away to go like, oh, whoop-de-doo, this is going to be done. I would tell you we're at the starting point. When I reviewed the quality manual and put track change edits into it, I immediately this week started writing the job description for the chief performance officer and quality management officer that's going to be needed to get all of these different functions to collaborate and coordinate with each other. Because right now I'm kind of that coordinator, but that's not my day-to-day, and it can't be my day-to-day. And this is like long-term hard thing, is relating these business systems across the full platform of the district's operations. And you needed to be in something, this needs to be in a context where it's not positional authority, but kind of team exercise to build policies and procedures and implement systems that will support the overall success of the organization. So I want to make sure that we put this in context, that we're going to have this infrastructure, some of this infrastructure, because I'm not going to lie to the world and say we got a quality management plan. We're going to have it draft, and we're going to grow into it until we can get to a substantial point of where we have things implemented to demonstrate that we're implementing it. And this will be something as we go forward, assuming the board supports this, that you should expect annual strategic updates on this journey. because this is real work and we've teed everything up where it's all come together. I'm talking about not just these consultant studies, but all of the work and business systems. We either have contracts awarded or in the process of executing contracts, but everything now is going to be about how do we connect all of this stuff. So now we can go to Laura's last slide.
Going to the last slide is really just a wrap up of where we are at the moment and what we're seeking from you today. And again, just looking for your feedback, your thoughts, so that we can further refine what you're seeing today, as well as fold that into the deeper dive that we're already involved with and would like to pivot if needed. Ultimately, when the plan is adopted, we intend for it to include a clear description of all of our shared values and vision for the future, as you saw today, includes a broad perspective of all of our stakeholders, and everything in our mind is starting to line up. And hopefully when you see this in a couple of months, you'll see sort of the more of the buttoning up of things related to the next year in particular, but we'll also have the 5-year plan available for you at that time. So that does conclude our presentation, and we are happy to answer any questions and turn things back over to you.
Thank you, Laura and Lori. You obviously have put a lot of effort into this and really did listen to the board. I can see that in what was produced. So let me see who's got questions. I'm going to start at this end.
Thank you. And I'm one of the folks that has a hard stop because I have to pick up my son. So I'm glad I get to go first. Thank you.
Of course.
And so thanks for the presentation. And I do remember our conversations and really appreciate seeing this before us today. Just a few questions, and then I'll also wrap in my comments since you'll see me exit, I'm assuming, while others are sharing. But, you know, I know one of the questions I had was around, I know in the mission and the vision, I think we mentioned all, you know, making sure that we're striving to incorporate all. And I know that's a goal, right? Like that is something that we're hoping to achieve in terms of making sure, but I think that, like, I guess I ask the executive director, how do we anticipate that we can meet that? Because, right, like you want to be able to meet that, right? So I'm just trying to, yeah, because we use all twice. And for me, anytime we use something like always or, you know, very definitive, that gives me a bit of heartburn. So I'm like, all right, how do we make sure? Because we could say it without saying all. Yeah. It's the exact same thing. But I'm just concerned that if we say that, it's almost like we're setting ourselves up not to be able to get there.
Well, so very good point. But from my perspective, where we are today is going to require us to be much more nuanced in terms of how we provide public transportation than what we've historically been talked about. So historically it was talked about mass transportation, and mass transportation is take a corridor, run a bus, run a rail down it. That's different from mobility, right? So mobility means that we're going to have services that meet different needs. So in the rural parts of the county, we may not be an NCTD bus, but we have to come up with mobility solutions for people who live in the rural part of the county. We are going to have to come up with mobility solutions where we may have to leverage what other people, it could be the private sector, it could be another transportation provider. It could be something as simple as us contributing towards the cost of a trip. So when we say all, I think it's critical that we take the notion that maybe it's not going to make everybody happy or fit everybody's need, but all's an important thing. You think about the context of when we talk about public transportation today, having been a parent and trying to figure out middle school and high school transportation, and knowing the cost associated with having to either get a kid a car, get a kid insurance, or the personal cost of having to be the driver to get him to the school itself. There's a market niche there that taxpayers who may not normally ride public transportation could see a clear benefit for. If you're in a rural community and you don't need a ton of transportation mobility, but you do need that trip to come to downtown area to get to either to the VA hospital or to another business opportunity or whatever, it's important that we have a transportation system that embraces the diversity of all of the different needs out there.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so just making sure that we're thinking about what the different modes that folks utilize and making sure that we're part of that conversation. Great. Let me get to my questions. I have a bunch of comments that I wanted to include, but, I know, Matt, you used, the acronym KPI, and I know what that is, key performance indicator, but, could you just very briefly explain what that is for the public in case they don't know what that is?
Yeah, so one of the things that we have to move towards is implementation on a broad perspective is key performance indicators. And you see them kind of coming through in summary of our reports, whether it be a ridership metric or on-time performance metric. It's really, really important for us to have KPIs or key performance indicators that reflect the various levels of our organization. So when I talk about key performance indicators, there is a certain relevant set of key performance indicators that are relevant for the board. There's different sets of key performance indicators that are relevant to me as the executive director. But then there's different levels of key performance indicators that should be relevant to the person who's on the shop floor maintaining a vehicle or the person who's driving the bus. So it's really about helping people to understand what are those factors that create success for the larger organization going all the way down to the ground level. So it's not just a macro KPI, a key performance etiquette, it's the one that will allow people at their different levels to contribute towards that success.
Great. So basically it's a metric that allows for us to measure success, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. I'm just trying to consolidate it so that easily somebody could pick it out and understand what you meant, but I like the extra context. And then last question, and then just really brief comments. I know you mentioned that there would be a need for a chief performance officer, and obviously that's a cost, right? And that means it's an ongoing cost. I guess question for you around this, because from what you explained, it would mean that this individual would be the one working on continuing to build the policies and procedures, really looking at how everything would come together, breaking down those silos. Is this more of a short-term role? Is this something that you're wanting to incorporate as something that would stay within the organization? And I heard you say we would bring back, this plan every year. So I'm just trying to understand from not only a private sector standpoint, but also a public sector standpoint, how this role fits in, with a potentially a chief operation officer, right? So just
Two different things, because
Yeah.
the chief performance officer is global and is helping all of those chiefs and department heads to be connected in decisions about how we implement business practices and understanding and identifying those key performance and making sure we get the value out of those systems that we implement. So an HRIS system will have impacts, human resources system would have impact across the organization that one may think is just impacts the human resources department, but it also impacts the operations department. It also impacts the financial department. And so when you start looking at those impacts, there is significant need to foster cross-pollination and cross-collaboration, and to the degree possible, efficiency of sharing positions and resources that will help you to implement these systems in a much more efficient manner. My analysis around these systems and the need for a chief performance officer should be that you should be able to demonstrate savings. And you will be able to demonstrate savings, because there's a notion of implementing a system. And in fact, we did a JD Edwards upgrade years ago, and we're no better off than what we're without doing it. And that, when I look at that, it was, it needed to be a one NCTD approach and a clear understanding of where's the organization at, how is the system going to be used, and really consensus buy-in that we're going to use this system and we're not going to buy side systems that also overlap the functionality of the system. So I view it as a permanent position. Obviously, nothing is permanent within the infrastructure of life. If you have to cut positions, period. But it's a critical position that I think for the long-term prosperity of the transit agency, especially agencies that's endeavoring to insource bus and rail, you do need this. Performance is continuous. The whole good, better, best approach of our operations means you never get there. You're never perfect. You never get to put your feet up on the table. You always got something to work on.
Okay, thank you for the answer. And just really quick comments and then I gotta go. But around I think it was, let's look right here. So I know we mentioned, operational excellence, organizational excellence, customer service, excellence and communication connection. This might be a little nitpicky, but I just thought, how can we make it so that it all jives together, right? I mean, I feel like excellence in operations, organization, customer service and communication, right? Community connection are all things that, like, why can't it all be all excellence in all of the, I thought about that, thought I'd throw it out there. But one of the other things that I appreciated, and I think that what we would benefit from, was explaining what each component means when we put it all together, because I think people that have worked in organizations where you've had to deal with a strategic plan and had to come up with visions, missions, principles, values, you will understand what that definition means. But if we're trying to make it digestible for the public, I think it's really important for us to explain what each component means, because otherwise, I know if I were that person and I didn't know, I'd be Googling it and trying to understand what does each thing mean. So I think even just a one sentence so that you can understand
little
what each of that
glossary.
means, it would just help so that they can understand where our organization is going. And again, makes it more digestible for the common person. The other piece that I just wanted to mention that I'm glad, because it was funny, right? When we talked about organizational principles, I wrote down, what about innovation? And then I saw that under organizational values. So I like that fed into that. And I think I know it sounded like a lot of folks talked about innovation. So I'm glad that we brought that into that. The only other thing that I think I wanted to mention, and I know, Matt, you emphasized this a lot, is how do we incorporate, and I know you've been focusing on this, is the equity piece within our organization and ensuring that, we're really striving for that diversity, equity, inclusion piece. So I just wanted to emphasize that as how do we incorporate that into making sure we are an excellent organization. So,
not to give away the reveal.
yeah,
But, as I said, we've been working on the objectives and have no doubt that DEIB factors heavily throughout the whole component around organizational excellence. And there are any number of plans that we're putting in place to address that. It's as important it is to you. It's equally important to us and to the employees.
okay.
and to Matt.
Yeah, and I know, I mean, Matt and I have talked about it offline, and even I know Matt's emphasized it previously. But I just wanted to put it out there.
Yeah.
Just because we're talking about it today and something that I truly value in my organization, but also here and just in life. So I think really appreciate that. Other than that, I might have to yield my time because my son, I have to go pick up my son, but thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for the great comments and questions, Director Bhat Patel, Director Hensey.
Thank you. So yeah, very thorough presentation, and every word that I would hope we included for the most part was included. It was really, I could tell, very thorough and well thought out, and the braiding of these three major concepts together, I think you achieved really well. I think the main thing that I see as a spot that we could focus on would be in the area of climate action, environmental sustainability. I think the word that has emerged post-pandemic is resilience, and all the ways we've had to be resilient as an agency with the new conditions that we're living under, whether it's, more trees that have ever fallen on the train tracks and due to atmospheric rivers and high winds, more closures due to sea level rise and impacts to our fragile coastal bluffs. And then communities that need to be transported maybe, from really hot parts of our county to cooling centers or cooling areas. How can we factor in our climate action goals, both operationally and with our capital projects that we have, and continue to refer back to those as we make decisions about really huge trade-offs that we're going to be facing in the coming years. One thing about the strategic plan that I think is really important is I love to see we're moving towards action. We're moving towards a place where we're going to be able to say, this is exactly how it feeds into this goal that we have. But I think for it to mean something is that it's got to live around us in a place we look to it. Oftentimes, it's not just in our binders that we receive when we all get onboarded and then never look at it again. I think it needs to be visually, I don't know if I'm making up this word or not, but interpretable, where you can look at a single page and it's captivating. There's, you have some icons, but it's in a single page that we have on the wall, we have on our website, we look at every time that we reference a staff report. And we as board members can really say, yeah, we're taking this action because a long time ago, we identified this one principle and now we're moving towards that one principle. And it also gives us a place to say, in 5 years from now, we've accomplished that thing and it's done. And now let's move on to a different thing. So I think for this to be a memorialized, but also a useful living part of our how we operate and how we think is going to be critical to its success.
Yeah, I'm a huge believer in the value and importance of information design as a tool. And I think about this, I tend to think about this work as planning, not a plan. And, consistent with Matt's comment about maybe there's even an annual refresh, but totally agree that this has to be a living document and it has to feel relevant. It has to feel timely. It has to feel relatable. Or else it gets put in a binder and sit on a shelf and nobody looks at it. So completely on the same page.
Okay, Director Jenkins.
Just a couple comments adding on to what was said. I think it's great to have these plans. We've all been involved in these plans in the past in different types of past lives. What I don't want to see is it all gets done and it sits on a shelf. So maybe reviewing it periodically and maybe even going back and talking to some of the people, maybe the employees mostly, or some of the people that you talk to, and not all of them, but some of them, to say, after it's implemented, are we ask them again?
Right.
Because if we're not
Yeah.
hitting it, then
What's the
it's
point?
what was the
Right.
point?
Yeah.
Looks like you were gonna say something, no? Okay.
I would just say a report card needs to be so I wrote down a note for myself. So we need to put out a schedule. And then we also need to put out, timelines of when we will be putting out report cards associated with this, because again, I wouldn't be doing this if I thought this was going to be a paper exercise, because I'm very transactional, that.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's going to be.
No. But I think we have to lay that out so that this information and the actual progress is seen, or where we're having struggles is actually seen in a transparent way.
Right. And then, I guess another question, and I understand why we're doing it now as we're coming up on budget and all that, but, talking about in the past few meetings about our possible upcoming budget, challenges, can we afford this? I know it's a multi-year thing.
Yeah. So I think we can't afford not to do it.
Okay.
And this is one of the things, because, I've talked about the fact that we have to be planning for a recession, but recessions are just part of a normal economic cycle. And you don't throw out, everything that you've had because the recession occurs. You manage and you navigate through through the economic downturn. These are like critical foundational things that we have to have. And they're consistent with our core mandate as an agency. And it represents kind of a true up of all of these years. Because, for example, I've been very frugal on staff resources to a point that now that as we're trying to implement these things, you actually, if you're going to say you're going to implement, then you actually have to have the resource to do it. Because it can't be another duty as assigned. It has to be somebody who can actually have the capacity to implement it. So I would say I'm totally comfortable with as we're going, and I'm also very confident about our financial position. I would stack that up against anybody actually in the country from a transit agency point of view, we're in a really good position for the next 5 years. Albeit if there's a significant decline in sales tax revenue, like what we saw in the Great Recession, guess what? Everybody's going to get impacted. So we'll just be part of the pack.
And so I think I did hear you say we would go back to some extent to some of the people. And how are we doing now?
Yeah, I think it, you
And
know, part of,
staff,
yeah,
staff mainly,
well,
to me.
so yes, with
Okay.
an exclamation point,
Okay.
right? Because as Matt just said, this is foundational
Mm-hmm.
to all of the work going forward. It's one thing to recruit. It's another thing to retain. And we've made huge investments in people that work here. And if I'm using, transactional language for a minute, it's not a good use of our investment to not be aware of how those employees feel, their level of engagement, their level of satisfaction. Otherwise, it's a sunk cost, right? We're throwing good money after bad. And so this idea of going back and, taking the temperature as it was to actually understand if employees sense the change, the investment, the commitment that we're making to a quality working environment that better supports them, that better supports their goals, that results in a higher level of satisfaction, which translates to quality and performance. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that we're, doing a great job here. So terrific. Mr. Dustman.
Thanks. I'm in a mood. Sorry. I've already
Uh-oh.
put this on the shelf, so I apologize. For the rider, they want a system that's easy to use, safe, clean, and efficient. I haven't heard any of that for the ridership's perspective. And maybe that's in the next presentation. But to me, this is all internal workings for Matt and your organization. I'm glad you're doing all these good things, but we're down here tweaking the gears and stuff like that, as opposed to looking at the bigger picture of how do we get our entire system. And I know we want happy employees. I know we want, everything there. And that end, that's on Matt Tucker. It's up to us to, I think, to kind of say, how do we get a system that's easier to use? Because this is what everybody asks me. I don't even know how to get on a bus. Wait, I'm on a roll. So how do we get a system that's easier to use, that's safe, clean, and efficient? That's what they want. That's how you would get me on a bus. That's how you would get anybody on a bus to take transportation. Another thing is I want to make sure that, we're part of a mobility system. We're public transit, yes, but we are part of a whole system that we have to support other ways of transportation as well, and just say, roads bad, transit good. We're all part of the road. The buses travel on roads and things like that, and that's part of the mobility program as well. So I noticed down at this big organization down in San Diego called Sandag, everybody fights over each other from one or the other, as opposed to coming up with a regional system. So when we talk about community engagement, and Jewel, thank you very much for that, we have to realize, hey, we're all part of this system. We have to support each other and work regionally as opposed to one or the other. So I don't know, what I'm hearing today is a lot of what Matt should already be doing. And why, I think, if these are all the best practices, I trust you to do them and carry them out. I'm not done. So I just think we got to take it from the ridership's perspective more along these lines. I appreciate the presentation. I appreciate it, but I'm just being brutally honest, is trying to get more ridership. And that's
You're gonna love the next presentation.
Okay, well, you got to wake me up in this one. So
So I will mention that I wrote down something that Lori said, which was customer experience, accessible and seamless was part of the community engagement. So I do think that is part of this, but we got so much thrown at us today that it's hard to track it
very,
all.
very tiny, and that should be the huge one.
All right. Well, Matt, did you have something to say?
The next presentation will say everything that needs to be said.
Right.
Director Drucker, do you have anything?
I have a few comments, but unfortunately, we're supposed to be done at 4. And this next segment is so much more, is really important. But I do have a few comments on this that I will try to be brief. First of all, I think the mission statement is too long. A mission statement for me should be something that somebody out in the field can repeat and know exactly, so that when they have to make a decision, they can go back to the mission and say, that is what I'm supposed to do. This mission statement doesn't do that. You know, it's supposed to be for those moments of truth when a person is stuck out in the middle of nowhere, can't get their supervisor to figure out what to do. They go back to the mission statement and say, this is what I need to do based upon the mission. And this mission statement doesn't do that at all. Number 2 is the performance officer. And I go back to my readings of businesses and how businesses grow and how they should grow. And I go back to Good to Great from Jim Collins. And he basically lays out a whole way to make sure that performance is made and is able to be completed. And that is and so for this specifically, there needs to be a 3-year plan to say, this is where we should be at the end of the 3 years. And then you come up with a yearly plan to say, this is where you need to be. And then you come up with a quarterly plan and a monthly plan. And if that's done properly with senior management, then you're not going to need a performance manager. You're going to be able to do that as a senior management team. I agree that you're going to need a quality person, but a performance manager, I think that basically advocates the CEO's position and all of the senior management positions managers' positions to work together so that they can make sure that the goals are being met. And those goals will change. You know, you'll create a 3-year plan, shall we say a 3-year plan and a 1-year plan and a quarterly plan and a monthly plan. They're going to change every time. And so, you know, I realize, Jim, that you think that all this is all operational. It's very difficult as this organization goes from, I don't know exactly how many employees today, let's say 80 to 500 or so. More than that, whatever. But organizations, unless they have that, don't become great. They flounder and they will go back to the way we were in 2008. And so I think it's really important, you know, again, that the structure be put in place with senior management to ensure that the performance is being met and not put it on any specific person, but have the senior management, you know, a small senior management team that is able to get that. Because again, it's going to be totally different in the environment into the future. So more than happy to chat with you more about that, Matt, because it's just really important that this be done correctly rather than just haphazardly and based upon personnel. It's got to be based, as you saw, it's got to be based on procedures and policies. So I'll leave it at that at this point.
Okay, Director Contreras.
Thank you so much for the presentation and for putting this together. I'm actually going to agree with Board Member Desmond. You know, I think it's important. We're in a theoretical space almost right now, and I think we need to move into a material space. And I think that's, if I look at the strategic plan framework, when we get to how the objectives, key results, action plan, that's where we're going to start moving into that more tangible side. And what I would offer, I have a lot of questions. I mean, I just like wrote a ton on here, but so one of the things I actually want to tie in the non-agenda public comment that we received on TDM. do we at NCTD have a TDM plan?
Transportation demand management, public transportation is transportation demand management.
So do we have an incentive program besides, free transit for employees?
I don't understand that necessarily what you're getting at, to be honest.
Is it? Okay, so
So,
let me,
transportation demand management
Right.
is a toolbox of different types of services, and public transportation fits within the transportation demand management toolbox.
so
Mobi-
what I'm asking is, if I were an employee or anyone outside of the organization, and maybe this can be part of our cap. I know that board member Hinsey brought this up, and at one point you said we were working on a cap. So I just want to tie these two things together. Is there a spot where even me as a board member, I could type in transportation demand management and I see a plan?
No, because public transportation is if you want to see our transportation plan, that's our service implementation plan, and a lot of what you're going to hear today in terms of plans that are already out there. But which is kind of what you're asking for is what public transportation is transportation demand management.
But what I'm not hearing is a connection to our employees and how, am I not making sense? Like,
I'm confused. So I ran transportation demand management from a statewide basis. I'm confused between what are you talking about mobility management, but you're connecting it to our employees. And if I go back and I'm trying to weave together your thought, then you're connecting it to the comment that the caller made relative to parking infrastructure at Oceanside Transit Center.
it can be a multitude of different tools, like you said, a toolbox. But because what I want to ask really is how many of our employees use transportation, public transit.
But okay, that's a totally different.
So how do we get there? And is TDM going to be if we have an actual plan, is that a way to bring that to life?
Well, it depends, but a good deal of our employees are not going to be taking public transportation per se to work on a day-to-day basis, but we can pull that information over time. But again, transportation management plans itself are typically tied towards major trip generators, much bigger organizations, and can be scaled down to a smaller. So you're asking, do we have a TDM plan for the agency, which would be resources to develop that, and then to narrow down what is the group of employees that would be eligible for a TDM plan?
Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds great.
Okay. All right.
Because I really think that if we're going to continue to grow our employee base, then that's something that could be useful. And maybe it's a small little thing, but it's part of an overall comprehensive, holistic way of achieving organizational excellence, so I just wanted to ask that. And let's see here. So I also want to ask, eventually the strategic plan framework, when we get to the action plan, how is that going to tie into, let's say, the North County CMCP plan? Because I'm seeing here on the North County CMCP on page 95, there is an estimation that by 2050, approximately 25% of the population in this study area is going to have access to high frequency stops. So is that something that we should we be taking that information and putting that in our action plan? Like, how are these regional planning documents going to interact with our strategic plan framework?
Yeah. So the next presentation is going to be about service market analysis and ridership development. So when you talk about something like the CMCP, you're going to have large at a strategic plan level, larger plans towards identifying specific metrics that you want to reach in terms of growing ridership and other factors that could be climate related and sustainability related. The actual service plans that you're going to see are going to capture those kinds of details, because those are the things that support these goals. So it comes bottoms up. So it has the community connection piece, captures all of these different activities that are going to occur. But you guys are right to say, okay, when you look at the strategic plan, a lot of it is towards how you organize internally. But guys, yeah, but it's also your job. Because from a policy, so what this is doing, we're doing, yeah. See?
Okay, gentlemen.
No, I think, yeah, it's,
Okay.
look, I think we're all on the same page. And that's why I think it's important as quickly as we can to get to the market analysis and the service discussion, because that's a lot of where where the heart and soul, and it's a great discussion that you guys have, because that is the core of what we do. I get it. The core of what we do is mobility, right? And then it's the people who deliver that service. But this creates the framework towards pushing us towards the excellence. So I totally get the discussion around, we're talking about in-house shop. This is one of those reasons why I don't typically do a whole lot around this space, because it can become kind of ephemeral to people. But it's a critical thing because you all, the board, is supposed to set the strategic direction for the organization, not the executive director.
Yeah, and so I just want to ensure that these things that we're talking about right now, where are those going to be housed in the strategic plan framework?
No, it's not. So again.
So there's no connection.
No, it's not. There is a broad connection. And I think part of what you're trying to do is to get into a level of detail that you shouldn't, okay? Because the truth of the matter is we always are going to be doing service development plans and market analysis around those service development plans. So remember, we said this is the grand convergence coming into a strategic plan document. If every damn thing that every idea that we're going to come up, whether it be our financial plan, our service development plan, all of those things are not going to be detailed into the strategic plan because nobody's going to look at it. Okay. So you're about to receive a presentation that's going to be focused in on how we set our market and service and ridership development plan for the next 5 years. So that's going to be included. So if you look at your budget document today, we have all of these different sections in our budget document today. So we have a strategic plan in our budget document today. We also have a service implementation plan in our budget document today. So all of these things come together. Just because you don't hear the detail of everything in this section right here, it doesn't mean it's not being provided for. We're hitting kind of those key points and understanding what are going to be the success things that we have to do to create this success. Because without works, there will be no success. Okay? Without a foundation or framework of operations, there will be no success.
I can see that that Chris Orlando is over there getting very excited about answering these questions soon.
Right. So I'm not finished because I still don't quite understand what you're saying, because I feel like these things should fit into each other. But and here, maybe this is a tangible way to do it. So I want to tie in kind of like this visual design that board member Hinsey brought up. So one of the things, because we do want to be reminded of the strategic plan framework. So perhaps it's even something on our agenda reports that it could say, this item fits under operational excellence. This item fits under organizational excellence, customer service excellence, community connection. So that way we can continuously, as a board and as a public, be reminded of the strategic plan framework, because the worst thing that we could do is create this plan and forget about it, right? So
thank you for those comments, because I agree. That was the one thing that I wrote down that really appealed to me about what Director Hinsey was saying, that, identifying our values, walking our walk, and making it very streamlined and public and on the surface, right? So that we know what we're doing and why we're doing it, as was delivered earlier. I know on my work plan, for example, my city's work plan, it's divided into our pillars and what those things are under those pillars and why they comply with them.
Can I also add on to
okay, it's your turn now.
I don't think so. Are you? So just with that thread, the OTC Center is going to feature some really strong pieces of art, and that's going to be the new building as well. I mean, 4 pillars pillars of art that really visually demonstrate the 4 pillars is something I think you could take advantage of as well. Also, as a teacher, you told me there'd be a quiz, and it's customer, organization, community, and operational. If you flip the order around, Coco works really well to remember it. Just saying, that's how I'm going to remember it from now on. I dare you all to not remember it the same way. So I do thank you for all the work on this. While I understand you have to set up the organization because it's not about one person, it's about the long-term fundamentals of the organization. I am concerned that as a public-facing agency, a service-based agency, that there wasn't a lot of public input into the goals, from my understanding. And again, I take this as a grain of salt because I'm walking into the building as fresh off the street. So you're getting a little bit of public feedback right now. I heard words like seamless mobility, and I didn't see enough of the word access. So those, well, I think is a nice way to say it, but access is the way that's graspable, like a really tangible thing I can hold on to. I also see, even on this, like every slide, and again, I don't know the history of this part, but it says one community, and North County is many diverse communities. It really isn't one community. I love all of these people from different cities, and they all come from very different cities. And that's what's the most beautiful thing about it. So I think you run the risk of not connecting when you think of yourself as all one instead of many built from many. That's kind of again, we're talking a little bit out there, but that's the first thing that struck me when I saw one community and all and those things. And then, of course, I would support the climate resilience as a major initiative, a major turning point within the plan itself. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I think that I have a feeling that Director Contreras is going to be having some conversations with our Executive Director Tucker and digging in a little more on this. But there is no vote necessary on this. It's information only. So with that, I think the next item on our agenda we'll move to now because our time is getting constrained. It's an update on market research and analysis project on which NCTD has been collaborating with Deloitte Consulting over the past year.
We went till 5. Can you just clarify that?
It usually is.
Yeah, with intent for 2.
Oh,
Yeah, today was intended as a workshop for 2 hours. Our board meetings, our board meetings are usually 3.
but I don't. think
Oh,
it's-
it was scheduled for 3. It was scheduled.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
You don't want to cut. these
I think
out.
that was wishful thinking for Mr. Drucker.
Oh, okay.
Okay. All right. So over the past year, NCTD staff has provided the board, guys. Over the past year, NCTD staff has provided the board and the public with updates on the project, which focuses on growing system-wide ridership. And remember, we're talking about the market research and analysis project with Deloitte. This collaborative effort will provide us with the valuable information necessary to make informed decisions about how we can recover and grow ridership across all modes. And by the way, I had some questions, which I will be asking people later too. Today, Chris Orlando, our Chief Planning and Communications Officer, and the Deloitte Consulting team will be presenting an overview of the final project report. Chris, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. I had a really long introduction to this, but I think the table's been pretty well set. I'm gonna skip that. And I will just say that this has been a 15-month project. We started in September, board approved it in September 2021. This will be the 4th presentation Deloitte's given to the board on the topic. So some of the folks who haven't seen this before, but this has been an ongoing conversation with Deloitte. With that, I'm going to let them present their recommendations and the results of their survey. With us from Deloitte are Ben Capano, Patrick Zubin, and Anat Diamani, and I'll let them go ahead and dive into their presentation.
Can you introduce yourselves before you start speaking?
Yeah. Anand Dinamani. I have the opportunity to lead what we call Deloitte's future mobility efforts. So I actually look at cross-industry implications of all the technologies that are coming our way and how it's affected how we all commute. I have a background. Actually, I started a lot of studying this problem on the commercial side of our business with auto companies and freight and others. And through that, realized that a lot of change in mentality and behavior for how we commute today, we need unlock policies for it. So over the last 3 years, have dedicated a lot of my time in studying this problem from a public sector lens, and put out a paper on the topic last year, which was recognized by Matt and the rest of his team, which got us into this conversation. So thank you so much for this opportunity. I think we are really looking into the role that public transportation can play, and organizations like yours can play in how behavior change can be affected around how we commute. So we'll talk a lot about that today. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Patrick Zubin. I'm a senior manager in Deloitte's strategy and analytics practice, and I focus on the state and local transportation market. Been working with Anand for the past 6 years across our future mobility efforts, and have had the pleasure of working with Chris and team on this project over the last 15 months or so.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ben Capano. I'm from Deloitte's strategy consulting practice with focus primarily in work around customer and marketing as well. Have been working with this team also for several years on transportation work, and it's been a real honor to work with NCTD, the board, and everyone else on this project. So looking forward to sharing the results.
Yeah. So today, just wanted to confirm time. We're still going to try and stick with.
We actually can run to 5.
Okay.
But we had hoped to run to 4. So we think we'll go a little over, but
okay.
Just
yeah,
we're here to listen and to learn and to work with you and to have a good discussion.
Okay,
so, thanks.
Great. Thank you for that. So today we have a fairly robust, hoping to have a really robust discussion around this topic of ridership, which I realized was a big topic of discussion leading into this. We've got about 5 key topics here. We'll give a little bit of background for how and why we got here. We'll talk a little bit about the vision for transit and the way you've set and the way we applied that to ridership return. Some of the initiatives that we discussed. We're excited to also introduce in this context, like we as Deloitte, one of our key strengths is analytics and artificial intelligence, which is a topic of prime importance today for all of us. And we've been thinking about how a lot of those technologies and intelligence can be applied to. So we're excited about how we've applied it. We'll talk a little bit about how we applied it in this context. And some of you may have already seen it in the previous board presentations. And then we'll provide you with an execution plan and the way we think what the next steps are. So to set the context, I'm not going to talk about it primarily in the context of transit because I understand, I assume that you are all very familiar with transit and the challenges that you're all facing with ridership, the decline in it. And obviously, COVID didn't make this any easier, right? But from our vantage point, I think, even before COVID, and this kind of goes back to my introduction and what I was describing to you all before, when you think about the economic, environmental, and equity-related outcomes that we are seeking in the face of climate change, in the face of disparity in income and distribution, in the face of several other factors that have affected our communities and societies, mobility and transportation plays a really important role with access to jobs, with access to communities, with access to people that we love. Unfortunately, we're dealing with a situation where public transportation, which serves as the lifeblood for a lot of that transportation in the rest of the world, it's not really front and center here in the US. And in the midst of all of that, while we've been a car-centric economy for several decades, and that brought us as far as we have collectively as a society. Going forward, again, when you put economic equity and environmental measures and objectives that we want to collectively achieve, there is no way out of that problem if without public transportation, period. There's no way to do it, especially when you think about reducing reliance on single occupancy vehicles, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, getting access, more people to jobs. There's no way out of this problem without bringing more people to use public transportation. And we realized that because the whole reason we started Future of Mobility, and I had given this presentation very early, was as one of the world's largest management consulting firms that serves majority of the Fortune 500 companies. We institutionalized the study around Future of Mobility about 7 years ago. We realized that advancements in autonomous vehicles, advancements in battery electric technology, advancements in drivetrain technology, all of that will fundamentally not only affect single individual industries that we serve, from energy to utilities to auto to public transportation and public sector, but it fundamentally transforms them. And the industries are going to look different going forward. And we wanted to study what that means. And that's why we even set up Future of Mobility as a practice of study. And the promise we made for ourselves, and I appreciate the comment that was made before, the vision and the ambition we set for ourselves was we're going to make mobility safer, cheaper, cleaner, more accessible. That was really the mission we set for ourselves. And when you started thinking about delivering on that mission, there was no way to deliver on it without working with public sector, which is why we really ended up pivoting to public transportation. And as we started pivoting to public transit and we started looking at public sector and role of policies in the middle of all of it, we were hit by COVID. So that has got us thinking even further. We put out a really large study around kind of where we see the world headed in terms of the future scenarios and all of that. And we were excited that we thought data and artificial intelligence and rapid scenario planning is going to be critical for agencies like yourselves to continuously evaluate your plans, your policies, and the implications it's having. So we, over the last 3 years, spent a lot of time in advancing it. But more importantly, in that context, I got the opportunity from Matt and the rest of your leadership team to come and think about what decline in transit ridership means for you all, and how do we really fundamentally change the trajectory of it. So over the last year and a half, we've been working with your team. We're really excited that this partnership that we have is really special for us as a firm and with you all, because you're one of the very first in the entire country that's thinking about this strategically, not only in the format of what it means for ridership, but also what it means for you all to now evolve your systems, methods, and processes to deliver on all of it. So today's presentation is going to walk you through some of our work, our initiatives, and what we've found. And I'm excited to kind of hand this back to my team here to kind of walk you through how the project was done. But before we move from there, I want to pause there to see if there's any questions on the context in the way we said it before we transition into the actual presentation itself.
Questions? No? Okay, keep going.
Right, perfect. Thank you, Anant. So next slide, please. Okay, great. So as Chris mentioned, we've been on a journey with you all for the past 15 months to really understand the core of this ridership challenge and the opportunities that the agency has to increase ridership. So I want to talk through a little bit of what we've done during that time. Much of this will seem familiar as we have presented to the board on several occasions. So first, we started by understanding the challenge itself. So doing an assessment of what the agency is dealing with internally and externally. A lot of this in the lens of COVID, but some of it not. To really understand what are the challenges impacting NCTD from a ridership perspective, and also just the transit industry in general. And we learned a lot during that process. We next moved into a process that we called scenario planning, right? Where we tried to envision what are the possible futures of North County, the environment in North County, even beyond transportation. What could that mean for NCTD? And this is based on a series of, what we've called uncertainties. So things that, depending which way they could go over the next 5 years, the world could look a lot different. And you can imagine how that has impacts on how people move around. So we learned a lot from that process as well. We did a rider segmentation. So we worked with Circulate San Diego, a local nonprofit, to conduct a rider survey of residents, not just riders, residents, riders and non-riders, people that interact with the system or choose not to for various reasons, to understand what are their transportation needs in North County? What are the different types of needs that we can meet? And we're talking mobility needs now. And we learned a lot about that, right? We learned a lot about how people want to interact with their public transit system or how they expect to. And then a lot of what we're going to share in detail today is this fourth column. So what could be the benefits of deploying several initiatives targeted around growing ridership? And we're talking quantitative benefits here. So the big theme of this effort has been, how do we take the qualitative work that we've done and the inputs we've received from the community, the people we've worked with, and that's the riders that we interacted with on the survey. It's the board, it's the chiefs at NCTD and Chris's team and Matt's team. It's, other stakeholders from agencies that interact with NCTD on a daily basis, right? And Sandag, and you think about some of the local universities and colleges and people that have either employees or people that are dependent on them to get around. So all of this was folded into our process during this project, and we're excited to share the results. Okay, so before we are going to share shortly a vision for ridership growth for the district. But before we do that, I want to go a little bit deeper into how this is customer driven and how the qualitative inputs we received from the community are incorporated into it. So I talked about the survey that we conducted with Circulate San Diego, and we learned a lot from that. And what you see on the left-hand side of this slide here are some of the key themes that kept on coming up again and again from both riders and non-riders. So they want the transit system to be easy for them. They want it to be convenient, to connect them to the right places. They want to feel safe and comfortable, as well as having it be affordable and accessible. And from this qualitative work that we did to understand the needs of people in North County when it comes to mobility, we then did a more detailed assessment of like, okay, what types of personas are there? Ones that maybe we are bringing to transit today, and maybe ones that we are not bringing to transit today. And what sort of things can we do as a district to incite some behavior change and make this a system that is accessible and convenient and easy and safe for people to access and incorporate as part of their daily lives. So we really focused throughout the whole time on the human element of this and how people expect to interact with transit and what they need. And we're confident that that's folded into the initiatives we're going to talk through. Next slide, please. So the nexus of these long-term trends that Anant referred to that were impacting transportation around the country before COVID, and the shockwaves that the pandemic had in San Diego and abroad, bring us to a pivotal moment for the district. And in this pivotal moment, the district is choosing to focus on high quality transit in North County and a high level of service quality for the people of North County. And to do that and to grow ridership as part of that, we think it's important to meet 5 points of this ridership growth vision. So the first one, emphasize reliability and frequency. So this is all about service quality. This is how do you, tell someone that if you miss the bus in Escondido that takes you to Escondido Transit Center, it's okay. There might be another one in less than 15 minutes and it'll connect you to a sprinter that goes in every 15 minutes, right? So how do you make it a system that is useful and that people understand and begin to trust it, that they can get to where they need to go? The second one is about safety and comfort. So how do you make sure that people feel that whether they're on the vehicle or at a station or at a stop waiting on the street for a breeze bus, they feel safe and comfortable, and there's amenities there and systems there to make them feel that way. This is also about creating sort of vibrant gathering spaces in North County. When we talk about the Oceanside Transit Center project, when we talk about future projects planned at Carlsbad, creating safe places where people feel like they want to congregate and be. Third, being seamless and easy. So this is a lot about technology and maybe new fare products that remove pain points that exist today for using the system. And we'll talk a little bit more specifically about what sort of things those are incorporated in that. Fourth, connect to growing North County. So as board member Joyce mentioned, this is a very unique community, and it's a large community that consists of a lot of different cities. And we have reason to believe that different parts of the county may grow differently over the next 20, 30, 40 years from an employment and also just a population growth standpoint. And that lends itself to possibly different mobility needs and a slightly different network for where people are going to be going. Point 5, the final one, is just about serving a wider audience and new markets. So the core of this point is about accessibility. So from a financial standpoint, so how do you offer targeted discounts to different rider groups to make it a more attractive option for them to take transit? And then the second piece is about physical infrastructure. So physical access, when we're talking about ways to remove barriers to getting to stations or to getting to where you need to go from a station, sidewalks, adjacent infrastructure, those sort of things. Next slide, please. So I just want to make sure we make the tie here from some of the work we did at the beginning of the project when we're talking about core challenges. So these themes on the left were some of the things that kept emerging. Challenges with infrequent, unreliable services, perception of lack of safety in some places, complex fare structures that impact decisions to take transit, the changes to commute trips that were happening, and also just hard to reach stations and stops and all about access. And that's, our goal with the 5 points of this vision is to improve the experience for current riders and to make transit more appealing or attractive for new potential riders. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is where we get into more detail about what we mean from each of these points of the vision. So again, just want to highlight a couple key initiatives that we're calling out here. And when you look at this, we're framing these as growth initiatives that the district should invest in to increase ridership over the next 5 years. So if we're talking about reliability and frequency, we're going to hone in on some of the benefits that can be achieved by increasing Breeze, Sprinter, and Coaster frequency. We're going to talk about safety and comfort. So I mentioned that this is a little bit about amenities at stations and stops and on vehicles to make people feel safe and comfortable. It's also about creating vibrant social centers. Seamless and easy. I touched on technology and fare products being important here. Several agencies, including some peer agencies, have moved to an open loop fare process or fare payment process, which alleviates some of the pains that exists today in terms of buying fares, loading it onto your specific Pronto card and paying today. So that's an option that we talk through. And then different fare products. So the district in the past several months, I think February is when it launched this 5 and 10 pack coaster fare. That's a great example, we believe, of giving some flexibility to some people that might be returning to work and commuting, but not necessarily as frequently as they were before COVID. And then another example of a fare product that change would be simplifying the zone fare structure. And this is also something that came up in our survey, complicated nature of a zone fare structure and what sort of benefits might that have at which price points to making it an easier system to interact with. We talk about, sorry, just real quick, finish up the two. When we talked about connecting a growing North County, this is really about deploying new service. So think about coaster service north and south. So extending into Orange County, as well as connecting down to the convention center, which is already in progress. It's also about what we're calling BRT light service. So when we think about more dedicated bus lanes and making the boarding and alighting process smoother to improve the reliability of the Breeze network on some routes. And then finally, serving a wider audience in new markets. This is about targeted discounts. Specifically, we touch on and we assess college student discounts, but then it's also about the physical access through micro-mobility options, through on-demand micro-transit in some areas. And then finally, the targeted marketing campaigns on the bottom. So we see all of this is underpinned by a series of detailed marketing campaigns that can be run. These are things such as maybe account-based rewards programs for frequent riders. Maybe it's a really robust ad campaign around the improved frequency, if that's something. It's working with local universities, colleges to market increased frequency or increased service around their campus, better to new students. Those sort of ideas that we've incorporated into this as well. Next slide, please.
Incentives, kind of things that you were talking about, because then you'd start identifying personas and types of riders and have more targeted understanding of what sort of incentives to offer to them.
Great. So, after we went through this process of developing this short list of strategic initiatives through community feedback, through stakeholder engagement, through the work with Chris and other chiefs, Matt and his team wanted to move forward with a data-driven analysis to understand what's the quantitative impact of these various, service improvement plans and strategies, and be able to move forward with confidence despite, the uncertainty in the transit environment over the last several years. So Deloitte, we used a proprietary digital twin and travel demand model called Futurescape to help evaluate and perform what if scenario analysis around each of these various projects. Futurescape's a digital twin. So what that means is it creates a digital replica of the entire county, all of San Diego County, including North County, of course, the multimodal transportation network, not just NCTD's system, but your partners and peers like MTS, as well as the highway and the arterial road network. And also, referring to Anant's comments around kind of artificial intelligence, it develops a replica of each individual agent and household and person in the county to help understand what and how they move throughout the course of their day. So we used Futurescape to, analyze all of these various projects, a subset of the service improvement plans, and understand what the impact would be in terms of ridership, new passengers and linked passenger trips, as well as mode share, congestion, and other metrics of interest. We calibrated the model through a rigorous, kind of calibration process to ensure that, what we were observing in our model reflected both the observed and empirical ridership data from NCTD in the fall of 2021. And we also used replica data, which is a third-party data source to help provide more up-to-date post-COVID travel data than was otherwise available. Next slide, please. So we analyzed 9 of the strategies that Ben just walked through individually to see the impact of each project in isolation on the overall NCTD system ridership, as well as each of the modes and services. We also built in several different portfolios and combinations of those projects to understand the compounding and interrelated nature of these projects. So, service frequency improvements along with, new modes and services like microtransit, along with, say, a simplified fare structure. There's compounding effects as these are all kind of combined together. By doing this, it allows us to see the cumulative impact of all of these projects combined, as well as the incremental nature or the incremental gains that you would expect to see moving from one bundle to the next. Next slide, please. So what we found is that overall, including all 9 of those initiatives, we would expect to see almost 2 million new boardings annually if they had been implemented in the fall of 2021. That's almost a 30% increase over the observed baseline data at the time. And this growth is occurring both across different modes, different services. It's attracting new riders and new customer segments. And it's, a reflection of the expansion of both service quality and service reliability, as well as access to new areas across the region. Next slide, please. So first, we'll walk through some of the impact here in terms of these initiatives, and we'll look at the individual analysis. So I think, first of all, just to point out, you see the greatest gains occurred thanks to the service quality improvements. So the frequency increases for Breeze, Sprinter, primarily led to almost half of the observed ridership gains. This reflects, again, the importance of core service improvements in terms of attracting and gaining ridership. The reliability and speed benefits from Bus Rapid Transit Light conversion on several different Breeze routes also had a pretty significant effect, almost 150,000 new riders. Some of the impact of the service expansion initiatives, such as the Convention Center extension, as well as the Orange County connection, they had a little bit less of an uplift, but I think I just want to caveat that by saying our model looks at what a representative weekday or a representative weekend, you know, in the county, right? And so unfortunately, what that doesn't capture is something like special events down at the convention center, Comic-Con, et cetera, where, you know, we would expect NCTD to capture a greater proportion of these sort of special event trips. But that is a growth, you know, opportunity moving forward in the future. We also saw some very, you know, interesting and compelling ridership increases thanks to a series of targeted discounts, particularly at college age students. You can see that that accounts for almost 20% of ridership gains. And then we also performed a series of, you know, fair price sensitivity analyses to understand what the impact would be of simplifying the coaster zone fare structure. We landed on a $6 flat fare for the purposes of this analysis. It didn't lead to, you know, necessarily a dramatic increase in ridership, but what it does do is improves the customer experience. It reduces some of the, you know, decision fatigue that people face when they're thinking about which mode choice to make. And we believe it represents a qualitative benefit, irrespective of some of the ridership increases. Finally, I'll just note here, microtransit. So we implemented and modeled a set of, you know, on-demand feeder microtransit services around 6 different key transit hubs in the region. We see here in terms of boardings that it actually leads to a small decrease in boardings in isolation. The nuance there, however, is the fact that you're actually reducing the number of transfers required by people to get to, say, a Sprinter hub or a coaster hub. And so you're improving the customer experience and reducing the number of kind of multimodal bus-to-bus transfers required. We move to the next slide, where we show now the impact of these projects based on linked passenger trips. You can see actually, again, just going straight down to the bottom, that microtransit actually sees an improvement in this case. And that's because even though there's some small decreases in boardings, what you're doing is attracting new passengers, new riders to NCTD's service due to the improved customer experience and the direct access to, you know, light rail and commuter rail. Otherwise, I think, you know, the only thing I would call out here is, again, you see the kind of overwhelming impact of the frequency improvements in terms of attracting new transit riders. And you also see, again, kind of the same pattern emerge with the speed and reliability benefits from bus rapid transit. One just kind of overarching message on this slide is, you know, these are net new passengers coming back to transit, coming back to NCTD after COVID. And, you know, we kind of see that there's an overwhelming proportion of the anticipated ridership growth is coming from, you know, both serving your core ridership, but expanding access to these new customer segments and these new riders that are going to return back with the comfort and knowledge of improved reliability and frequency. Next slide, please. So next, we're going to highlight here the impact of these bundles. So if you look at what we've shown here, this is the incremental, sorry, this is the percentage of the overall anticipated boardings by bundle, right? And this first slide here is showing the weekday ridership growth. So you can see that 64% of these new boardings are really resulting from the improved frequency and reliability projects, bundle number 1. We see a small improvement based on microtransit when we add that in. And then again, a sort of smaller benefit when we start to add in some of the service expansions. There's a significant additional benefit though, once we layer on top some of the fare product simplification, as well as the targeted discounts. Next slide, you'll see a similar pattern emerge. This is weekend ridership. This is a really intriguing and growth opportunity for NCTD, as well as other transit agencies that are seeking to attract, you know, some of the customers that are now traveling differently, right? Like we're all, you know, commuting differently throughout the week. And I think what we've observed here in North County is the fact that you're seeing tourists come down from Orange County and other areas in the region using NCTD services. And again, for those new customer segments, what you're seeing is a fairly substantial increase due to the frequency updates, and a little less so now here when it comes to the targeted incentives and fare simplification. And I think that's due to the fact that, you know, on the weekends, you're seeing less commuting behavior. You're also seeing, you know, college students are not necessarily traveling to class on the Saturdays and Sundays. Next slide, please. So now I'll just kind of quickly show the ridership growth by mode. Again, here's at a summary level, we kind of see again the overrepresentation or the higher representation in growth based on your Breeze bus network and your light rail Sprinter network. Next slide, please. So, you know, overall, what we see here is, you know, Breeze increases along a number of kind of key routes, including East-West 309, 302, 332, as well as some other north-south routes that parallel the coaster service. You can see some where the lines are thicker, those are experiencing higher ridership growth, and the bigger dots indicate stations and stops where you're seeing higher boardings and higher customers alighting at that area. Next slide, please. Sprinter, 800,000 annual boarding increases. I think what we would call out here is simply the fact that we're seeing consistent increases across the Sprinter line. So you're enjoying kind of ridership, you know, across the various communities that the Sprinter network interacts with. Next slide, please. And finally, coaster. So, you know, coaster is experiencing slightly lower proportion of the overall growth, but we are seeing, you know, significant boarding increases in Carlsbad Village, Old Town, and Oceanside. Next slide, please. So finally, I'll just close here in terms of our impact analysis by highlighting some of the different demographic and ridership composition impacts that these initiatives have had. So one thing to note here is that, you know, you can see in the map on the left where these new riders are coming from versus the baseline. A lot of growth, again, in kind of the western kind of core area of North County, as well as some of the eastern, more rural areas. In terms of the demographic profile, we've observed, you know, a really substantial increase in younger ridership profiles. 18 to 30-year-olds increased by almost 750,000 ridership annually. And we're also seeing a pretty clear impact of these initiatives in terms of, you know, different socioeconomic groups across the county, such as you know, lower income folks making less than $50,000 a year. They accounted for almost 350,000 new riders annually. Finally, again, just kind of speaking to the power of the targeted discounts, we saw significant increases in college students. That's both thanks to the targeted nature of the discount, as well as, you know, the service and network design of NCTD, which is really well disposed to serve the kind of the campus areas where these students live or are commuting to today. And then finally, I'll just say, again, what we noticed was not just an improvement and an increase in your core ridership or with folks that may be predisposed to using transit, but we also saw an increase in folks taking transit who also had other access to, you know, single occupancy vehicles and other modes, which I think in the long run, right, is where NCTD and other transit agencies are trying to move in terms of becoming, you know, true mobility managers that can, you know, reduce congestion, reduce environmental impacts, et cetera, with kind of our car-centric transportation network. Next slide, please. So there's a few next steps that we'll be taking here as a team, both on the Deloitte side, as well as, you know, with Chris and Matt and the broader efforts that Laura and Lori walked through earlier. So from our standpoint, we'll be wrapping up our strategic report and our roadmap of these various initiatives. This will include, again, a kind of a high-level implementation plan that nests within all of the other initiatives that the agency is working towards, as well as an impact analysis of each of these projects in terms of the before and after impact on ridership. There's also, of course, folding in of these projects into the agency's capital planning, programming, and service planning efforts that Chris and his team will be leading. And then I think importantly for all of these to be effectively executed will need to be, nested within all of the efforts that Lori and her team have planned out in terms of the organizational and technological supporting systems to make this happen. And with that, Chris.
Next slide, please, Suha. So wanted to come back to this slide. I know that's been a lot of information over the course of the afternoon, but really wanted to convey a couple things. One, the recommendations that are coming out of this program are not created equal. So we thought it would be really helpful for us to walk through each one and just talk a little bit and do some highlights around what it's going to take to do these things, both from a funding perspective, but also from an implementation perspective. The other is, as we've been doing this project over the last 15 months, Matt and I have been very clear with the team, like we can't stand still. So a number of these initiatives are already underway and we're making significant progress towards implementing them. They were things that were evident early on in the study that we knew we had to move on. Some of them represent themes the board's expressed to us throughout the last year or so that we've started to act on. So what I want to do, and I'll do this quickly and just hit highlights, but wanted to go through each one and just give you a snapshot of where each one is. There's more to it than I'll highlight. We can come back to them in the board discussion if you want, but thought it was important that you know what we're doing on each of these initiatives. So starting with the service frequency and reliability and increasing service. So starting with increasing breeze service, as the board knows, in the last meeting, the board reviewed the plan to restore some of the service that was reduced due to the staffing shortage. So the first step in that happened on Sunday with our new service plan that went in effect April 2nd. The second tranche of that is planned for October and then again in April of 2024. So that'll get us back to the core service that we had to reduce because of the staffing shortage. As the board knows, we're in the process of doing the breeze speed and reliability, which will get at some of these issues and recommend some specific infrastructure changes that need to be made in order to get at some of these reliability and speed issues. That is expected to be done in fall of 2023. At that point, we take those recommendations and work with each of the member cities on how do we implement those infrastructure projects. Many of those things are not NCTD projects, but there'll be city projects that will need help from your individual communities to implement. So that'll be the next step in that.
Chris, and I'm going to interrupt you just to also put a fine point on it. That breeze speed and reliability will also create the framework of improving roads and public transportation infrastructure. If you look at that study, if you go back and look at it, where we identified choke points for buses, we're the same choke points and congestion points for vehicular traffic. And so this is going to be the grand opportunity for both roads and transit to come together on a program set of projects that are going to support the true full family of multimodal needs. So there's not a final point to put on in terms of opportunities for collaboration together. Is that study that should be the plan that the North County Transit District Board submits as the regional plan for North County, because there is no argument that would be in the best interest of North County from both a vehicular traffic and from a public transportation perspective. It's hand in hand.
And then I wish, this portion was all good news, but we do have constraints, right? And so the board is well aware of our staffing constraints and what that places on the ability to expand breeze service. So in the April 20th board meeting, board's going to receive an update on where we are with that. And then of course, any future expansions we would plan for in our annual service implementation plan. The next annual one will be in front of the MISBTA committee later this month. So we'll be reviewing that with the committee members. What the plan for the coming year will be in terms of the service. So that's breeze frequency. For Sprinter frequency, the goal here is to get from 30-minute headways or frequencies to 15 minutes, because that's a critical psychological thing for not having to think about the schedule, right? So the initial phase of that infrastructure project is done. We've laid the fiber, which is the first step in the signal modernization, which is the next phase of the project. Very pleased that we received funding for $7 million for that project. It's currently in design stage, so that's the next step. Following that, we are right now seeking 9.75 million for the preliminary engineering and environmental for that project. And ultimately, we would need to double track about 9.5 miles of track along the Sprinter corridor. That's a $340 million project. So that's kind of the steps in getting to that frequency level that you see here for the Sprinter corridor. In terms of the coaster frequency, as the board knows, we did a pretty significant increase in frequency in October 2021, about 30% increase, 36% increase on weekdays, 150% increase on weekends. That's the frequency amount. So it was a big step up. That's had a really good impact on our ridership on coasters. So October to October, about an 80% increase in overall coaster ridership in that time. A little convoluted because that was also sort of the COVID recovery period. So can't say that that's entirely attributable to those frequency increases, but definitely helped, particularly on the weekends. We have 2 new train sets coming later this year soon. We hope those will be operational later this year or early next year. And that gives us the vehicle capacity to expand coaster service beyond that. However, expanded coaster service right now is not funded. And we do also have the additional constraint of double tracking in key sections of the corridor, which is also not funded. As the board knows, those, at least in the infrastructure pieces, are critical parts of our and high priorities in our capital project system. So that's the first one. How's everyone doing so far? Okay, because there's a lot. We're gonna keep going. Keep going. Okay, keep riders safe and comfortable. So we've taken a lot of steps on this one, and this is one where we knew we couldn't stand still. In July 2022, we added 10 deputies to our SDSO sheriff's contract. Unfortunately, they're also experiencing a staffing shortage, so we haven't filled those positions yet, but we're actively trying to. So that capacity will go up. But we've also knew that we had to backfill in other ways. So we added code enforcement inspectors. Those positions have been filled and they're out there on the system now doing that work. So it's been a really positive thing for us. And we've also added contract security on an as-needed basis to when we have large events or we know we're going to have big impacts, we can add some additional private security to help. The board will see a longer contract for that coming probably in the fall to expand that service so we have additional security. We also, in July of 2022, formed an employee safety committee. This was a part of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, was a requirement for all agencies to do that. And we've done that. And our safety committee is operational and working. And what that does is let the line employees give direct input on safety and security on the system. So that's been a really critical piece. We're in the process of a threat and vulnerability study that should be completed in June. And that'll give us some insight into other places where we can improve security. From a practical and infrastructure standpoint, we'll be proposing lighting at certain bus stops and as a part of the FY24 budget. So that'll be some specific lighting at bus stations, at stops to help ensure security. Ensure comfortable rider experience. Also included in the 2024 budget proposal will be upgrading about 30 new bus stops. So that's getting at this rider comfort question. The third bullet under this item is create vibrant social centers at NCT transit hubs. The board knows we've got 4 active transit-oriented development projects underway. We'll have 7 more coming along the Sprinter corridor in this year. Those RFPs will be out later this year. So that's actively going. Real-time updates. We implemented earlier this year a mobile-friendly version of Next Bus information on our website. So you can go on your phone, put your stop number, your route, and it'll tell you when the next bus or Sprinter or coaster is arriving. So that's there. We need to do more to promote it because not enough folks know that that's there. In our proposed budget for the coming year, we're adding a text back system. So you can text your stop ID and it'll text you back what time the next bus is coming. So that's an infrastructure upgrade that we're going to ask for in the coming budget, as well as e-ink signs on certain bus stops. These are real simple signs that give you the next bus information at the stop. So we'll be doing asking for a pilot program in the coming budget to add those at some key stops. Seamless and easy. Ben mentioned the 5-pack and 10-pack fare product. We launched that in February. I'm very pleased to report we've already sold over 300 of those passes. That equates to about 5,000 rides at least. So that's a really good project. It's only been in market for 2 months. So we hope that helps get at this hybrid worker who's not commuting every day, but needs an economical option. So that's good. Wayfinding. We've been making some, I call it guerrilla moves on wayfinding, meaning we're doing some very simple things to try and improve wayfinding. So we've made some changes at Oceanside, so it's clear what platform you have to go to, because it's kind of hard there. Pleased to report next week some more signs are going up. That'll make it really clear. Coaster this way, Sprinter that way, Amtrak that way. So those are going in place. We have a comprehensive wayfinding plan in our CIP. That plan is only partially funded, so not fully funded yet. So we have a path there, but haven't quite identified the full funding for that. Open loop payments. So in February, gave the board an update on Pronto and the map for Pronto. We've made progress on that map and expect the product map and expect to come to the board sometime in the fourth quarter of this fiscal year with a proposal for implementing an open loop pilot program on the Pronto system throughout the region. So we've been working closely with MTS on that, and we have a proposal that we're working through right now, and we'll come to the board for the board's approval to start that. So that's coming hopefully in May or June to the board. Simplify coaster fare structure. This one needs more analysis. So not quite ready for prime time. We appreciate it, and the work that Deloitte did gave us a good insight into that one, but we're still looking at that one as to how we would implement that into the future. So that's one that's probably a future effort. Convention center platform was in the recommendations. As the board knows, that's fully funded and planned. We're very much in the design stage of that. Construction on that is slated to begin in early 2024, completed in early 2026. So we think, particularly around that special event customer, that's going to be a game changer for us, because it's now a 1-seat ride to the convention center, to Petco, to the gas lamp. So we're really excited about that and think that's going to have a real big lift. Breeze bus BRT routes. So as board member Contreras noted, the CMCP plan is underway and almost completed by Sandag, which looks at some of those BRT routes. Sandag's also supplementarily studying other routes that could be implemented as a BRT or BRT light. Just to note, though, those added services are not yet funded. So we're looking at them, see how we could do them, but there's no funding for those at this point. Coaster into Orange County. So last year, we completed agreement with MetroLink for special event service into Orange County. We haven't yet identified a special event, and there's been issues with going to Orange County, as you all know. So we've not quite implemented that, but we have an agreement in place to do special event service currently. And then we are actively participating in what is called the CCANS project. So CCAN stands for Supporting Environmental and Community Advancement and National Security. Fancy acronym, but it's an effort along the corridor for all of the agencies to coordinate and expand service, work together, simplify fares, do things, do coordinated infrastructure to really so that the agencies don't operate as silos, and we work better together and really set us up really for the Olympics and beyond in terms of the service in the corridor. Serve a wider, I'm really ripping through this. I hope everybody's with me so far. Serve a wider audience. So implement on-demand services. So on the April 20th board agenda will be the software platform needed to implement microtransit. So we're ready to go with that. The board will present that item, and that will be the software platform we need to start implementing some of those microtransit services. So that is coming. Offer a deeper college discount. So we're really excited about this recommendation and are actively working on it. So late last year, we entered into a program framework agreement with Palomar College to work on a number of initiatives, and a discounted student fare was one of those initiatives. So we're in active conversations with with Palomar to come up with a discounted pass for their students and what that might look like. We envision it to be similar to what's done at UCSD. Palomar has a different student population, they operate under different rules than a UC does. So it won't look exactly like that, but our hope is we can come up with something that provides a universal pass for Palomar students. And we want to reach out to the other institutions in the service area as well. So started the conversation with Cal State already, Maricosta and other college area institutions within the area as well. There is a recommendation around micromobility. This is another one that really is simple, but requires active participation from the cities. And so, as you know, those micromobility solutions, which are scooters, bike shares, those sorts of things, really are accepted and driven by the cities. And so we are open to those. We have an agreement with the city of Encinitas, which allows, they have the B-Cycle bike share within Encinitas. And we recently completed an agreement where we could have a dock at our coaster station in Encinitas to extend what Encinitas already has going. But to implement those types of services really emanates from the city level. City first has to approve the providers, and then we could tag on to that like we've done in Encinitas. So we could do more on that, but again, that's one of those areas where we need city participation. And then the last recommendation is partner with landowners on hub adjacent infrastructure. So this is ultimately a follow-on to some of our transit-oriented development work. And so probably a longer term initiative and something that I think we will expand over time. The one area I will highlight is we are actively talking with the county around the Buena Creek Sprinter Station, because we have some work we want to do there. County has some redevelopment they want to do. So we're exploring if there's something we could do together to help that area and do some redevelopment. And that is it. I will stop. And
Wow.
we are happy to take questions and comments from the board at this point.
Okay, I think I'm just going to go ahead and start. Thanks so much, everybody, for the presentations. Really great information. And, yes, at high speed, I like that. Speaking of speed, so frequency, reliability, speed, and time savings have always, to me, that and cost competitive with car have always been the really pillars of making public transportation work for the community and convincing people to embrace public transportation and get out of their cars. So I like the idea, and I know it's not quite developed yet, of reducing the coaster fare and establishing something that's much simpler. I have Patrick's name circled for some reason. I don't know why. So one of the things that, I try to take public transportation when I can. I ride the train to Sandag meetings. I rode the train to jury duty. I came back via Midcoast trolley to bus, which was not good. And the reason it was not good is that there was no coordination for when my trolley got into UTC station, right? So that left me a 25-minute stand there in a desert. There was nothing happening there. So that whole comment of vibrancy around mobility hubs is essential. I've lived in cities, New York, Tokyo, where they have just world-class public transportation. And you always have something to buy, something to do that's right there to entertain you if you do have that delay. So super important, I believe. I think this is all great news. Funding, the whole coaster funding thing, that's a big deal. And I think that's where we all need to lean on Sandag as Sandag reps, or on our own Sandag reps, to make sure that the coaster is funded. There was promised funding, but it sort of disappeared a little. We got a year's worth of funding, but that expires. Is that correct?
No, well, they didn't fund the broader plan, and so we reached an agreement that funds the current expansion without the additional expansions that were promised as part of the ordinance.
So we were given funds to buy really expensive locomotives but we don't have the funds to run them. So this is why I think we need to be talking to our Sandak reps. So that's kind of what I have for now. Director Hensey.
Thank you. It's really interesting. I'm still wrapping my head around AI generating some of these trip numbers, but there was a lot of helpful information there for us, and some of it's really encouraging. I really liked hearing that the data supports 18 to 30-year-olds are a big source of our new trips generation, and that's consistent with sort of, I'm an elder millennial, but what my preference would be to wait in traffic on a bus with the ability to use Wi-Fi and work instead of in a single occupant vehicle where I'm just wasting time. So that's really encouraging information. Also encouraging about college students. And I like that we coupled a discount with that because they seem to travel in packs. So the more that we can have doing that, the better. And then I seem to think our biggest cost in transportation is the labor cost. And so how do we fill buses? And obviously we've seen that happen through the Youth Opportunity Pass, and that's a big cost, but it's a worthwhile cost because we have full buses and we're filling this critical need. And so what are other ways we can do that? And I think there's some really encouraging information here that perhaps if we offer discounts to some of our region's biggest employers, that they can be capitalizing on having this benefit of traveling in transit and using their workers' time more efficiently than sitting in traffic. The micromobility, I definitely hear that cities need to take the lead on it, and it really closes the last mile gap that I hear so much from constituents. So we need to keep leading on that. And then just the last thing, and this is kind of boring, and like I maybe shouldn't even talk about it, but you know, the FSAs for employers, they have the TSAs, so you can have this tax-free pot of money. And so how do we capture that tax-free pot of money and encourage employers to be paying into that and then paying us for that money that they're receiving tax-free? And I think that the discounts are one way to do that. And also, if any of you high-level Deloitte people have friends at the IRS, we also need that. We also need to be able well, if you're, maybe Matt schmoozes more with people when he goes to DC and the IRS than I do. But they also need to include like the micro mobility incentives as part of that transport funding, because we should be able to buy e-bikes with it. We should be able to buy the e-bike passes with it, just as we can buy the transportation passes with it. Because like I'm sitting on $3,000 I didn't spend because of the pandemic, and I want to buy like year passes to everything that I can. So yeah, those are my comments. Thanks very much.
Okay, Director Jenkins.
A couple questions. When on pages 12, 13 or so, when you were talking about micro transit, just want to understand what I'm looking at here. So it looks to me, as I look at this chart, that micro transit doesn't necessarily increase our ridership, and you gave a couple of reasons why that happens. So I'm trying to understand, should we be putting a lot of effort into that when we can see with different initiatives, the breeze frequency goes up significant, and these others where we can get a bigger bang for our buck?
So I'm a quarterback this with them because it was great what they found. So if you capture the essence, so what we're talking about is mobility. The reason microtransit yields the result is that it reduces the number of trips, and in public transportation, a transfer counts as an additional trip. One of the essential reasons why we want to implement microtransit is improved mobility, so that if I need to take a short trip, I can do it via the shared ride and do that short trip without a bus transfer. And if I want to draw a zone, and so that you can have efficient travel within that zone, I can do that zone. And if I'm within it, I can have a 1-seat ride. But if I need to go on, I can go into a hub and transfer to a bus. So what it really does validate is kind of the whole methodology, because our methodology our approach has to be about quality that would resonate to the customer. So the customer needs to be able to have a mobility experience. I need to go to Rouse, okay? And do I want to have a transfer in 45 minutes to get to Rouse? Or if I live 6 miles from Rouse, can I take this shuttle? Can I take this microtransit and go to Ralph's to get my groceries and come back home. Yeah. And so what it means is that on a bus, it could potentially take 2 trips. What it means on microtransit, it means it's 1 trip. So when you do the math, it's a reduction, but it serves our higher purpose of high quality mobility for the individual.
Well, wouldn't it also be true that to put these different micro transit systems, like we had the one in Carlsbad, we're talking about piloting one in San Marcos at some point. The development needs to be there to support it. So we have to be very strategic where we pilot the micro transit, so we don't pilot something that's going to fail as a pilot.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think so. What we're talking about is pretty big program of what is microtransit,
Yeah.
right? And so we have to understand what is the scale and scope of what we're trying to implement. I've been in the discussions with whether it be Uber, Lyft, or whatever. They will tell you there's a need and purpose for a fixed route bus system. And it serves a specific purpose that they cannot match. Then there's a specific need for public for mobility that microtransit works. And remember, when we talk about microtransit, it spans a spectrum of services that we may directly operate based upon a market need. So say, for example, we draw a zone and we said, hey, we're going to make Breeze service go a lot faster. So I use 101 route as an example for people. So if you ever ride the 101 bus, I think it was 80 something bus stops in each direction. But if you ever get on it and you see kind of the different mobility patterns, it's like the Sprinter, it's different mobility patterns and different needs. So there's a market within a market. So there's a market within the Sprinter, as an example, of people who are just going between Oceanside and Vista. And then there's a market of people who are going from Vista to Escondido. On the Route 101 bus, if you look at where people are getting off on the, so microtransit fills a niche that, hey, it may be just much more efficient and effective of a trip purpose for you to be able to have a direct 1-seat ride. So you have to understand the nature of the market and the issue you're trying to address and the opportunity. And we should not be afraid from testing things and finding out that it did work or didn't work. That's part of the whole process. But within the whole framework, microtransit, the beauty of it from a mobility point of view is this is not all about NCTD. So as we're procuring this mobility application itself, it's supposed to be leveraging off of other transportation providers as well. So that it may be the case we're integrating with Uber and Lyft and other transportation providers that can provide transportation purpose, because at the end, you want us to provide high quality service. At the same time, you want to do it at lowest cost per unit to achieve that outcome. And that's where you try to leverage between public-private partnerships versus things that you're going to do directly yourselves in a much more efficient way. So think about it. It's a pretty broad concept of what we're trying to do here, but their analysis is spot on with what one would expect, because you should generate less trips as a result of giving people enhanced and improved mobility within a small, short distance of travel.
Okay. On page 20, where you talked about Patrick talked about the initiative investments. Again, looking at the biggest bang for our buck, I'm kind of going down here. If we can increase 750,000 annually, would that be our number one, is to target the younger riders? Or is it a combination? It seems like we should go for where we can bring in the most sooner, whereas the bottom one is 76.
I don't know if we're necessarily recommending targeting one group or another.
Okay.
It was an outcome of these broad investments in service frequency improvements in the microtransit, like Matt just described. And we saw an outcome or because of that, significant growth in younger ridership, as well as, college age students and low income folks. It's not necessarily an either or, it's just all the above outcome of these investments.
Okay.
And then there's some conditions precedent that we have to do as a district. And I always believe in like a high level of transparency. We have to improve service quality. period. Like the Sprinter service quality is nowhere near where it needs to be. The Breeze service quality, it's nowhere. Last weekend was a very traumatic weekend for me. In fact, I think you guys need to up my health plan as I was looking at service failures that were happening real time. So it's a package of things that we need to do. And I'll tell you, the realization that I got to, because honestly, I was distressed this weekend watching page outs and calling employees about what the heck was going on. I trued up Monday morning, went out to West Bus Operations Division and started talking to employees. And, it struck me, we got a whole lot of new people that were hired during the COVID period. A lot of my senior go-to employees are gone from the district, and the culture that they brought, it's gone. Okay, it's just not there. And you have a different ethic of work ethic and understanding of what we do from a senior management level point of view, a different understanding. And a need for us to reinforce the expectation that failure is not an option for us. So I say this to say to you, all of these ridership improvements are buttressed on some foundational things that have to change. And that's been my focus the last month. And then after last weekend, it put it into even another gear for me. The underlying premise is we got to get service way better. We got to improve safety and security on the system from the perspective of someone who may be riding the system. I was on the Sprinter and I watched, there was two ladies who got on and they were trying to go to lunch, but they got on the train and it happened to be a very disruptive person who was struggling from a mental health point of view. And that person really negatively impacted their riding experience. We can make whatever value set that we want to make about, where society is. These are broader issues that, I tell everybody I've bought lots of options in transit vehicles. I've never bought them with options with people either who are committing crimes or people who are struggling with mental health. These are community issues. But all of these things have to come together when we're talking about how we're going to make our system better, more attractive to people. And I think even for our open spaces and open living, where people feeling comfortable to navigate and walk places, we have just a lot of work to do. So everything that I view that they're talking about that we're doing, there are some foundational things, NCTD, foundational things the community, whether it be the city or the county, have to help us with together. We all need to pursue together to create the kind of environment where people feel good about where they, how they get to places and when they get to places.
Right. And then you talked about North County Transit working with the city on some future road benefits. Is that in addition to what we're working on the risky projects? Risky. Whatever that is.
I was like, I was about to say, Sharon, I'm not working on any risky project. No. So yes, it could.
It's in addition. It's just a yes or no.
It's a complex question
Okay.
you're asking, so it's not a yes or no. So what Board Member Jenkins is raising is we have this committee that's working with us that's looking at potential as like grade separation elements of projects. So some of those projects overlay. So some of the projects that from a rail point of view and from a road point of view also impact the bus system.
Okay.
So there are some projects that overlap both. And then there are some projects that are simply road improvement projects.
That in addition to.
That also
Okay.
impact transit.
Okay. And then last question, and it really is a yes or no, I think. The 9.5 miles that needs to be double tracked for the Sprinter, does that include the loop or no? The loop is separate from that?
The loop is separate from that. So our initial project did not include the replacement of the loop because of the cost. I know you
Okay.
told me to say yes or no, so I'm sorry.
No, I just want to clarify. Thanks. That's it.
Thank you. Director Desmond, do you have any questions?
No, they've all
Comments?
been answered. Thank you.
Okay. Director Drucker, any questions or comments?
First of all, thank you. Excellent presentation, and all the suggestions I think are wonderful and excellent. I think a couple things. One is I would love to be able to see the persona market segmentation, that data and how that all interacts with the current commute. And in turn, how that also interacts with the a matrix of this is the improvements and this is the ridership improvements. It's the detail on that is going to be extremely fascinating. My final comment is, I think a whole lot of this depends upon people using their mobile phone in a lot of ways. And when you did the Pronto presentation, you said the numbers of people that are using Pronto in North County versus MTS area is extremely different. And so therefore, it would seem that one of the things that we need to do is have some type of marketing program that will get our ridership so it's closer to 90% of the people using it. So that in turn will make a whole lot of these initiatives a whole lot easier to implement.
Yeah, and that is the, we see a larger reliance on the Pronto card versus the Pronto app. That's I think what you're referring to. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the more people are using this versus a card is huge. And, it's just another thing we need to figure that out, how to get that to be done so that people are not, so that we can talk to people and people can talk to us versus having, just be totally in the dark as to what's happening. So again, this is a long process. Really appreciate all the work that you've done on it. And again, the devil's in the details in terms of really determining where is the best bang for the buck, because we can't do, it's the 80-20 rule. Let's get the 80% done and figure out really what that is.
So Ben, I think that Director Drucker asked for some data sets. Can you guys get those to staff and then staff could distribute them to the board?
Yeah, so what's going to be included in our final report that we end up giving out after this presentation, we'll have that persona analysis in there. So as I think we had shared with the board several months ago, the results of our market segmentation effort, and it resulted in these 9 personas, different stories about how riders and non-riders interact in North County, what their needs are. So that will be folded into the kind of the deep dives that we provide on each of these growth initiatives as well. So like which type of personas would be more or less likely to be brought to transit as a result of this initiative. So we'll include that detail.
Thank you. I think we're moving to Director Contreras. Do you have some comments, questions?
Yeah, and just to go off of Board Member Drucker to start off, the comments on the Pronto and the digital Pronto card being absolutely necessary, especially with the expansion of being able to communicate directly with our customers. I think it's, when we can get to the point where people, the issue with the Pronto card is that it's very hard to scan it, right? So, it increases the amount of time. If there's a lot of people trying to get on the bus, right, it kind of takes away from it being a little bit more rapid. So the sooner that we can move to being able to tap your phone and that be able to, pay for your ride using the digital Pronto is important. And, one of the things that I want to really look at, because I haven't heard it when we're looking at targeted discounts, and I've brought this up several times. I really think it's important for us to figure out how to get family discounts. Because, you may have a family of 5 or 4, and maybe some of the children can get a youth opportunity pass and maybe some of them can't, right? So when you start getting to a family of 4, it can be, or maybe even too. It could be not cost competitive with using a vehicle, even as the cost of gasoline goes up. So trying to figure out how to do a family discount, I think is really important, and maybe only having that available in a digital way. I don't know. But it probably is easier to manage, and I don't know what that would look like. But I don't know if we're planning on studying how to implement a family discount. But I think that's really important. I want to also discuss, it was said by Deloitte, vibrant gathering spaces, and then we're looking at vibrant social center for our transit hubs. I'll tell you, it really sucks when you're using public transportation and you have, a little bit of time in between connecting, maybe from the Sprinter to the coaster. There's nothing around there. And I know I'm like most humans in that I get hungry. So if I want to get anything at let's just talk about Oceanside Transit Center, I have to go to a vending machine. And I actually have had an experience where I just like could not get anything out of the vending machine and it still took my money. Right. So is there a way for us to create a vibrant social center at our transit hubs by having street vendors, by having food trucks, and having that be part of the stream of revenue? Maybe there's some kind of revenue sharing, maybe it's a permitting process. Is that a possibility? I would like to, get an answer to that. And also going along with creating, vibrant transit hubs, is there the opportunity maybe where we have enhanced security for there to be pocket parks with tot lots, a way for people to have a dynamic experience while they're waiting for the coaster, the Sprinter, or the Breeze bus. One of the things when it comes to frequency is that it creates redundancy, which is really important for a system to work. And I would love to see, I think we have a pretty good timeline. I know there's a lot of constraints with bus operators. I can't wait to see us restore service and then expand it. That's really important because in order to have a reliable system, you have to have some kind of redundancy weaved into it. The choke points with the Breeze reliability study, I'll just say we got to do something. And I talked to Caltrans about this, and I brought it up here that there's a huge choke point on the 303 bus where the 76 and North Santa Fe intersect. And there's actually room to create maybe a bus only lane on when you're going on the 76 eastbound, and trying to make a right-hand turn. People already in their cars are queuing up, but maybe we can dedicate space there for a bus only. That in itself could shave off 10 minutes of that bus being stuck at that choke point, or maybe more. Questions for the Sprinter. I know that we have constraints on expansion of times because, there's freight that uses the line too, but if we could have late night frequency expansion on there, looking at all the data, the Sprinter is where we're going to get a significant increase in ridership. So trying to figure that expansion of frequency, and not only in 15-minute headways, but also in duration of operation, I think is critical. I have a question regarding the infrastructure that we're building to increase frequencies. You talked about the fiber optic being laid. Is there any issue with doing that and then doing grade separation? Does that have to get redone, or does it get integrated in the same type of project?
They planned for that as they
Okay.
do that project. Yeah. And the fiber optic is anticipating the signalization modernization, which is all about improving the gate times at the intersections, so that the gates don't have to be down as often and run more efficiently. So yes, that's all contemplated as they do those projects.
Okay, awesome. So it's going to be already built in with the opportunity for us as we get funding or can access funding to do the grade separations. With the coaster $6 flat fare is one of the issues, because I know that in previous board meetings, we've discussed that the coaster fares almost subsidize the rest of the types of transportation that we have. So is that one of the constraints that we're seeing right now, is to not being able to implement a flat fare?
Yeah, I think the challenge with the flat fare is how do you price the trip on a value basis, meaning like the longer you travel is equitable to what you're paying, right? So that piece of it. And then the second part is a revenue impact. And so how do you find that sweet spot where you maximize both ridership and revenue? And the pricing. So I think some of the data that Deloitte surfaced through the project will be helpful in us looking at that. But really it's about, can we do something like that and increase ridership, but also maintain or increase revenue as well?
Okay. I figured that would probably be, I don't think it was spoken, but I figured it was unspoken.
Yeah, that
So I
was-
figured I'd speak it in.
Did I say that well, Executive Director? Okay.
So that's good to know that we're going to be looking at what we can do for a flat fare. There was a comment about 30 new bus stop enhancements, and my question is, in the city of Vista, we have 8 bus shelters. Are those that are going to be done and enhanced? Is that part of the 30?
No. Yeah.
Oh, okay, awesome. So this is an additional 30. And we actually, I think, are able to fund the entire 12 with the permanent supportive housing development that's going in. So when it comes to micro transit, are we looking at any partnerships or direct operation of LSVs and NEVs, the low speed vehicles, neighborhood electric vehicles?
That program, Sandag has a program for that. But that is, those types of services would be enabled through the app, but we would identify service providers. But our focus is really not there, but more on the larger vehicles and the sort of core service.
Okay.
But the platform that we are initiating could manage that type of service.
Eventually, if like Beep comes to North County.
Correct.
Okay. The last thing I want to say is, I think it's really important for us to come to a full understanding and embracing that e-bikes are going to continue to be adopted by the broader public. And that we need to create a seamless way for cyclists to integrate to our transportation system, whether that is having additional capacity on the Sprinter or the coaster for folks to bring their e-bikes on, right? Maybe they can't, maybe we can't fit 1 billion trikes, but maybe we have some restrictions on it, but being able to really be forward thinking and understanding that, I mean, especially as the incentive program at the state rolls out, that we could see a proliferation of e-bikes. So I think that's important on the coaster, Sprinter, and the Breeze. And I know that one of the issues with the Breeze bus, having various tire widths is an issue, and then also how heavy some of the electric bikes are. But being able to figure out a strategy so that we can procure buses in a way that helps us build out our capacity to create these seamless connections. Because I know, we purchased a bus and we want it to be alive for 12 years. So I want to make sure that we're thinking about how to expand that connection between cyclists and our transportation system.
Wait, that was your last question. You said
that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just checking. I'm just making sure.
If there were a few that we didn't answer directly, I'll circle back to you.
Great.
And
Yeah, I know. I
talk
just threw a
offline
bunch of
about
stuff
some of
at
the
you,
others.
so thank you.
Director Joyce.
So for number 2 on the previous slide, what is a vibrant social center at a mobility hub?
In terms of like, how is that defined?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll let Deloitte sort of give their view, but from our perspective, it's partly what we envision through these transit-oriented development, meaning there's lots of drivers for people to be there. There's spaces where people want to be in. There's commercial, there's other uses that create energy, vibrancy of lots of users who are there for different reasons, who then access the transit, the transit's there, and they're not just viewing the transit center as a place to get on the train and get off the train. They're viewing it as a destination, and there's amenities there that make it a destination that they want to be at. Did I capture it, Dean?
And the concept is really the mobility hub that has been laid out in detail with all of those features. It's really a location, as Chris said, that you want to be there. There's already activities organically generated at that location. So, think about like Oceanside Transit Center.
I am.
Yeah, and think about that if we, from a placemaking point of view, if you have a mixed use development there where people can live, where people can come in and stay at a hotel, then it transforms everything around it even more than what's changing in Oceanside from what I've seen over the last 15 years pretty rapidly, to a place that you want to be. So the coffee shops are there, the restaurant opportunities. If you want to be able to sit and chill and do some work on your laptop, it's an environment that feels safe and conducive to that kind of activity. Place you want to live. It's a place you want to be and you feel safe and secure in that environment, and that there's a multitude of different transportation hubs and connection points for you.
So because I think this is kind of your exit point, what did Skynet look at that didn't work? Like, what were the things? Because you had some really good, the college discount one, right? What discounts did you throw through the system and say, this doesn't work? Because I want to know what ideas not to bring up when I'm on this board next year. I know this probably wasn't planned for, but if you have any of the ideas that didn't come through as strong modes, it'd be great to know.
Well, I guess a couple things. First of all, there was a longer list of sort of initiatives that this was already a short list for, so it already been kind of winnowed out through our own kind of workshop and sort of consultations with Matt and Chris and other stakeholders. In terms of the things that we analyzed in FutureScape or Skynet, I guess.
Just give it all kinds of new name ideas.
Yeah. You saw what we did analyze, so there weren't a whole nother set of things that we threw out.
Okay.
One, with the exception maybe of some of the additional price sensitivity we did around the coaster fares. So we also looked at $5, we looked at $7, and I think as you would expect, there were increases in ridership at 5, decreases at 7, because of the fact that the average fare paid today is about $6.30. So, but we landed at 6 for the purposes of kind of the presentation and the bundles, because it was more or less revenue and ridership neutral, and that's kind of the balance that we're trying to strike.
Okay. So there's a possibility of using a $7 fare as a steady fare.
That's something we threw out.
Yeah, so and that's where the whole complexity gets, because the theory when people talk about, okay, going away with the zones as an example, it's cute when you just say it and it make it sound easy. But what I said to Chris is, hey, the average fare was this. So how do you end up with the average fare when we have to protect certain populations with discounts? So if all of the kids under 18 are riding for free, so then you have to adjust that price point to capture that those are riding for free, assuming, somebody's not paying for it. If somebody's paying for it, but fine. But if that subsidy goes away, then you have to adjust. Then there's the protected populations of seniors and people with disabilities who get half fare off. What does that mean for that? So it ends up becoming one of those business decisions. Then do I make it that fare so high and punitive to people who are riding that they're now not gonna ride because the cost is so much.
Yeah, it's simplicity versus the cost. That's a math equation.
It's a trade-off, and this is where the board has to be comfortable, where we start testing things and seeing trial and error, how do things work? 'Cause there's no, this is by far the most rigorous process that I've been part of it in my career. There's nothing like putting some things out there and testing it from a real market point of view.
Yeah.
Right now, the complexity, so much is changing coming out of COVID. Like month over month, we're seeing ridership trend grow back. Now you're seeing some people return to the office. I don't know how much that's going to continue in the future, likely more as as the unemployment rises. But that you're right on point. That's the complexity of it.
Just for the idea of events from Orange County, just to throw this out there, Pride by the Beach in Oceanside is an extremely attractive event that does bring people from Orange County. So if you're looking to an event that's specific to bring people in, that's a good one. Right here, Oceanside. And then, and then just lastly, I really think that we should be sticking with things that are going after young riders. Thing that happens, lifestyle of seeing transit as part of the life. And so I appreciate that that's built in, and I thank you all for your work. It's really interesting.
Well, with that last comment, Director Joyce, I will tell you, you're preaching to the choir. So we were very in support of the opportunity process and exactly the reasons that you did, because I sincerely believe that if people start writing early, they have no fear and continue to be like writers. It's a very good point. Joyce also mentioned it mean to have and fun or whatever mobility hub, right? So this conference that happens every year, Transportation Association, and it's in Atlanta. And I found very train stations, lots of TOD. So around the TOD stations, they have things like art. What it was all just around. Another station it was called a garden. Another station had grand piano or a baby piano, and there would be people that would just play. So I think maybe it's not just food, right? To be able to chill and to check on your, this beautiful is Wi-Fi, I'm sorry, or do whatever. A lot of things that can improve the experience around the station. One we had saved, which from the first presentation, which applies as well, on that Director Patel and Director Jenkins. There was a whole thing. I mentioned part with part with others. It gets to modal. Is this thing that we do see as patient needs are out more?
Yeah, and that's inherent in the microtransit platform is to keep those service. Not service. Yes. We were.
And then you have 5 increasing frequency fine. That was I can't remember what was linked 3 and 5 because that's their structure. Finding or college are kind of the same. That's okay.